Hello and welcome. You know, there's nowhere better than good old country living. Or sitting down with your neighbors and enjoying a meal of corn and okra right out of the garden. Maybe even some onions and black-eyed peas, Walter.
There you go. You know, one of the challenges that we face living in the country is the challenge of fire, whether it may be a house fire or a wildland fire. A lot of times we don't have the luxury or the advantage of having a fire station just down the street when we live in the country.
The other challenge that we see in the country is most of the fire departments are manned by volunteer firemen. Therefore, it can take them a little while to get from home or from work down to the fire hall and then respond from the fire hall out to that house where there's a fire. For that reason, Walter and I would like to spend a little time with y'all and share with y'all from our experience as firefighters on how you can protect your home and your property from fire. Oftentimes we don't think about having a fireman at your house all the time, but we can. And the way you can do that is having a smoke detector. Some people call them fire detectors, but smoke detectors, as I have over the years fought house fires and fought many of them for a number of years, I've never taken a dead person out of a house fire that had a working smoke detector. Now, I've pulled quite a few folks out that did die in the fire that did not have a working smoke detector. And what happened? Well, it could be because it was going off and mom or dad didn't want to hear the noise, and so they pulled that battery out. Or it could be that Junior was taking a science class and he needed his calculator, and to work the battery is dead, and so Junior went and pulled that battery out and put it in the calculator. And so that's an area that we find problems. But before you put it up, you want to do something here, and that's to test it out. One year I went and bought about 15 of these for a family at Christmas time, and before I took them away from the store, I tested them right there in the store, and over half of them didn't work. So it taught me to always check and make sure that a smoke detector is working. So what we want to do is, the first thing we want to do is test it before we place it, because this smoke detector is there to save your life and your family's life. This one's a little slow. You'd like it to be faster than that. So look at some brands that may be a little faster at reacting, or it could be this one just as a little slower in reacting. The next issue that we want to do is where are we going to place it. Walter, where's a good place to place a smoke detector?
Outside of the kitchen area.
Outside the area of the kitchen, okay.
Outside of your bedrooms.
Outside your bedroom? Yeah. What about the kitchen? Where's an area that folks will place a smoke detector many times and it causes problems?
Above the stove, or maybe above the toaster.
That's right. Toaster goes off, it burns the toast, the alarm goes off, and mom says, turn that thing off, I can't handle it. Or dad says, turn that off, I'm reading. Well, we pull that battery out, and then that night, another night, we forget to push that battery back in, and then someone can actually die in that house fire, because when that fire starts, as this is up on the ceiling, you're going to have that smoke go through the house, and it's going to reach that smoke detector, and it's going to warn the family. Depending on where you live, many codes require that a smoke detector is interlinked with the other smoke detectors in the house. And what happens is, if there's one in the basement that goes off, or one in the attic that goes off, where there's a non-living area, the rest of the house is woke up because every smoke detector goes off in the house, and that's a great way. So if you're building a house or have the ability to wire for that, then that's a good thing to do, is to link those between each other so that all of them go off.
That's right.
There's different kinds of smoke detectors also where they're battery powered, they're powered by electricity. I like the one that's both, because battery power, your battery might die. Or if it's electrical, you may have something electrical that throws the breakers, and before the fire gets to where the smoke gets to where the smoke detector is, and so it's not working. So personally, I like the one that's a combination battery and electrical, so you have both sides. Walter, when should you test a smoke detector?
Monthly, yearly?
Yes, absolutely. Every month, just test it, and all you need to do is it's up on the ceiling, or it may be up on the top of the wall up here, and all you do is just walk by, push this button, and test it and make sure it works. Now, some of the smoke detectors have a little red light that will show up, blink, stay solid, and that lets you know that the battery's still good, but I like to hear that sound. I like to hear that alarm. It gives you some assurance that your family's protected. Another problem that we see with smoke detectors is longevity. A person will buy a smoke detector and think, I can have that smoke detector for the rest of my life. Well, it's not true. Smoke detectors actually wear out. The sensing device which senses that smoke gets less and less sensitive. And actually in healthcare, we had to test our smoke detectors every year and pay a company to come in and test them. They have a little bowl-like device that goes over the smoke detector. They pump smoke into it. And just like we did a few moments ago, where you see how fast it reacts, that would not be fast enough in a healthcare facility, that smoke detector right there. And what happens, they start giving it just a little bit of smoke, a little bit more, a little bit, and finally when it kicks off. And if that detector does not kick off within a certain range of smoke, you have to replace that smoke detector. And what is happening is that smoke detector sensor is wearing out. Look at your box. Many of the boxes will say replace every 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but look at your manufacturer recommendation. They also sell, you can buy a can of smoke, and the can says smoke. It looks like a little hairspray bottle, and what you do is you just spray it up there, it sends smoke, and you can test it. Because when I test this each month, or once a year, as Walter was talking about, and I push that button, it's only telling me, is the battery good? But it's not telling me, is the sensor still good? And so if you take that smoke and blow that can of smoke, or as we did just a few moments ago, get some material that will burn, blow it out, and test it with the smoke, I would do that at least once a year and make sure, up to the point that the manufacturer recommends. At that point, again, your family's life's at stake. Throw that away, buy another one. Smoke detectors are very inexpensive. This one here was only $4 and something. You can pay $20-something. So it's a cheap firefighter that's in your house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We talked about in the house, if you had a smoke detector or a fire detector, it was like a mini fireman in your house 24 hours, 7 days a week. But there's another little guy that you also want to invest in, and that's a carbon monoxide alarm. Anytime that you're using, whether it's in the garage with an automobile, in a wood stove with a chimney, a propane hot water heater, or a gas logs in your house, or a gas dryer, or it may be just a kerosene heater in your house, you want to have a carbon monoxide poisoning, because you can have the escape of carbon monoxide, and when you're asleep at night, that can kill you. So this little guy sticking up in the areas where you do have those gas devices can save your life and your children. Another item that you need to have at your home is a fire extinguisher. A fire extinguisher is like a little fire truck at your house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Fire extinguishers have advantages. They are portable. It's easy to carry. If you have a fire over in that building over there, you can pick it up and just run to the building and put it out, and something that you can carry. So it's fast. But it has disadvantages also, or limitations. One is that you have to be close to the fire in order to extinguish. Where if we had a fire hose and I could have my guys go and attack it, if it's a lot of heat, they can be back far enough until they can work into it. Where this you can't. You have to be pretty close to start working it. Another disadvantage is how long is this going to last? A fire truck's going to last a little while. You may have 1,000 gallons of water in it or more. This guy right here, you might get 30 seconds out of it. So when you squeeze this trigger, you better get ready to go, because it's going to go out fast. There's different kinds of fire extinguishers, and they're based on different kinds of fires. There's Class A fires, which is ordinary combustibles. It might be chips like this. It might be paper, ordinary things that burn like that. A B type extinguisher is petroleum products, gasoline, oil, that kind of thing. A C fire is electrical fire. A D fire is a metal fire, a type of metal. And there's different kinds of extinguishers for the different types of metal. And there's a new extinguisher out which is called a K extinguisher, and that's for the kitchen. It's a kitchen extinguisher. For a number of years now, for probably 20 years now, in the kitchen we have not used an ABC extinguisher, which is like this one here. You've got your ABC. It's a multi-purpose dry chemical extinguisher, which is good for Class A fires, B fires, and C fires. The A agent can cause some problems when you're spraying it on a stove fire that has grease. It can react to it and not work as well. So you want to use just a BC extinguisher in the kitchen or a K extinguisher like the new ones that they have today. Then you also have just water extinguishers. They just have water in it. And you only want to use that for a type A fire. You could use it possibly on a B fire, but definitely you don't want to use it on a Class C fire because that's electrical. But you can change the electrical fire and change it into a Class A fire, and all you have to do is unplug the power source. And once that power source is turned off, now you've changed the class of that fire. Let's say you have a radio that has caught on fire or a television that has caught on fire. You don't want to use that water extinguisher on the electrical appliance. All you do is unplug that, pull the breaker, unplug the plug. Now you can put water on it and it's safe. Otherwise, the electrical current is going to travel back up on that water and it can shock you. You also, on extinguishers, you want to look at making sure they're well charged. This extinguisher here has a gauge. Most of your extinguishers do. And you want to make sure that your little yellow arrow is in the green zone. If it's to the left of that, you want to have it recharged. Once you do press that extinguisher, as we mentioned before, press it and get going because you only have 30 seconds. But once, let's say you have a fire and you put it out, you put this back, and you've only used it for maybe just 4, 5 seconds, 3 seconds. What happens is there's a pin here that penetrates a seal. That seal then will allow the gas in the extinguisher to push the extinguishing agent, the powder, out of the extinguisher. Well, once you penetrate that seal, you're going to have leakage. So when you put that extinguisher up, you then come back later. It could be tomorrow, it could be a year later, and try to use that. It's probably not going to work because that gas or that propellant has escaped and it's not going to work. So once you've used it, that's it. To recharge an extinguisher, it's very simple. There's different kinds. You have some extinguishers which have a plastic head, which is more economical, but you can't recharge this one because it's too dangerous for the extinguishing company to recharge this because the plastic could explode, and so they will not recharge this one. So this is a disposable extinguisher. Once you go, it's out. You may still have a lot of extinguishing agent. You can have one that's this big with a plastic head, but if it's out, you got to throw it away because it's going to leak and you can't keep it stored. You can't recharge it. So I encourage folks to spend a little extra money and go with the metal top instead of the plastic top. Where do you put extinguishers? I would put extinguishers definitely in the kitchen. You want that K extinguisher or a BC extinguisher if you already have a BC. Whatever your fuel source is, your heat source, if you have a wood stove, I would have at least a 5-pound extinguisher. That's what this is, a 5-pound extinguisher, or a 10-pound extinguisher, and you can put it in that area. And I would have one on every level of the home, at least a 5-pound to a 10-pound extinguisher, upstairs, the living area, in the basement, in the shop. In your car, you can have an extinguisher of this size, or you can have an extinguisher of this size. On an annual basis, you want to take, and you've got the dry chemical, and that dry chemical can collect down here. So once a year, maybe when you're changing the battery on your smoke detector, you want to go ahead and take this and pound the bottom of it. And that's all it takes. Maybe on once a month you can do this right here, and that will allow it to to break that up, because if it's hard and clogged up, then what it will do is the gas will escape out, but your agent will be clogged and hard, so it's not going to come out with the propellant. Where do you get a fire extinguisher? You can get a fire extinguisher from a fire extinguishing company, but I encourage going to a major hardware store, and you can get them from them. An extinguisher like this may cost you $30, $40. With the metal top, it's well worth it. I'd encourage that. Walter, tell us about how you choose on, how do you use an extinguisher?
When we use an extinguisher, we use an acronym called PASS, PASS. The first thing we do is we want to pull. There's a little pin that we have on this extinguisher right here. First, we want to pull this pin out. So that's P. Then we want to take our hose right here, we want to aim. Then we want to squeeze the handle, and we want to sweep. Pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep.
How far back might you stand, Walter, when you're coming up on it? Do you want to just come plumb right on top of it and spray it right here if it's on fire, or what do you want to do?
Maybe stand back about maybe 5, 6 feet away and work your way toward the fire as you're sweeping in a sweeping motion.
Very good. Another thing you want to do is children and folks with dementia, they have a propensity to sometimes, they may take a piece of paper or something and stick it in the end of that barrel. And so when you're doing your monthly shaking or your annual checks, or you might want to check and make sure nothing's been put inside, maybe a color crayon or whatever inside of there. Walter, let's try it out. Let's see what we can do.
All right. All right, so once again, we're going to use that pass method to put the fire out. So we're going to start about 5 feet away or so. We're going to take our pin and we're going to pull it out. Now that we've done that, we're going to lay it aside and we're going to take our handle and we're going to aim it at the fire and we're going to squeeze and sweep. And that quick, we're out.
One thing you want to be careful of is if you have a person who has respiratory problems, you don't want to use an extinguishing agent in their area with their lungs. I can remember back a number of years ago, there was a small home that had caught on fire. A security guard had gone in and just discharged a 10-pound extinguisher, twice that size. It was a little dollhouse is what it was. And the fire was out, but I went in and I could not breathe this stuff. It's hard to breathe. I had to go back in with an air pack. So if you do spray it, don't breathe it. It's not the best to breathe. But if you have it around people who have lung problems, asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, or any type of lung problems, be careful, get them away, and don't have this extinguishing agent near them because it can aggravate the lungs. When fire departments are looking at addressing the fire needs of their community, they're doing pre-planning for major buildings such as schools, healthcare institutions, government buildings, in order to determine the floor layout, how much hose they're going to need to get to whatever part of the building. They're going to be looking at whatever chemicals are there. So we do pre-planning in order to make sure that we know what we're going to do once there's an event there. I also encourage you to do a pre-planning on your home. In pre-planning on a home, you're looking at where are your smoke detectors, where's your fire extinguishers, where's your carbon monoxide detectors, where is your escape routes for the home. And so that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time on, is how can we pre-plan that house, have systems in order that if there is a fire at your house, you are doing as much of a controlled environment as you can. Walter, help us out. Let's say that we're looking at extinguishers and we're using the Legend X as extinguishers. Where would you put extinguishers in this house? We've got first floor, we've got second floor.
Okay. First of all, extinguishers, we'll start with the kitchen.
Okay.
Now, in the kitchen, we're going to want either a BC or we're going to want a K extinguisher. So in the kitchen, one thing also to remember is that we don't want to put the extinguisher above in the cabinet above the stove.
Why not?
because when your stove catches on fire, then you have no way of getting to your extinguisher.
That's right.
And I've
And that's
seen it
happened-
happen a lot.
yeah, many
There's been
times.
plenty of fires I've been to. You go in there, the whole kitchen's been in flames, and they says, well, we would have put it out, but we couldn't get to the extinguisher.
That's right. We got it right near the stove. It's right there where Mom can grab.
That's right. So we want to make sure that we don't put it above the stove. Put it somewhere that's easily accessible, easy to get to, nearby, but not above. So we're going to put an X over here in the kitchen somewheres. Now, another place we might want to put one is in the living room, because we got in here, we got a fireplace or we got a wood stove. So we're going to want to put one close nearby it as well. So maybe we'll put one right here on this wall. Let's see, another place you might put it. Let's say that this right here goes down into a basement, down behind these stairs here. Then that's another place you might want to put one as well.
Good.
And maybe at the top of the basement stairs, maybe at the bottom of the
Great
basement stairs.
location.
Somewhere on the stairs is a
Open
good
that
place to
door,
put it.
and there's one right
It's
there.
right there.
Good idea.
Another place, upstairs. Always good to have one upstairs. If something did happen upstairs, you know, lamp caught on fire, something happened,
Right.
you know, you don't want to have to run downstairs to go grab the extinguisher, because the fire could take off quickly. So maybe say we'll put one right here on this wall in between those two door jambs.
Let's say that we have a basement and we haven't drawn it here because we're dealing with evacuation plan and we don't have any living areas down there. But we do have a hot water heater. We've got a gas dryer. Are you going to put one downstairs maybe?
I would.
Okay, good.
Definitely.
Okay, let's look at what kind of extinguishers. You talked about a BC and a K in the kitchen. What kind of extinguisher are you going to put here, here, and here?
I'd put an ABC extinguisher.
Okay.
And an ABC extinguisher is going to cover both your regular combustible materials, such as wood, paper, your couch, etc. Your B is going to cover your petroleum products, and your C is going to cover your electrical.
Okay.
So you've got everything covered. If you have your TV in the living room, it catches on fire, you've got the ABC, and you can use that just as easily. So.
Great. What about our next legend? Let's talk about a smoke detector.
Okay.
Where would you put your smoke detectors in this house?
Alrighty. Starting with the upstairs this time, we want to make sure that we have at least one smoke detector outside of each bedroom. In this plan here on this floor plan, it's really simple because all the bedrooms come out to one location.
Right.
So in this situation, we may only have to put one smoke detector upstairs. Definitely we're going to want to have one right here in the center.
Okay.
Now say maybe in the master bathroom. That might be another place to put
Great.
it.
Good.
So maybe we'll put one in here. But let's say that there isn't a door in between the master bathroom and the master bedroom. Let's say that it's got, you know, a header that we could put it on. So maybe we'll put it right there so that it covers both the master bathroom and a master bedroom.
Okay, good. Now, what about, let's say that you want to be extra cautious. You got the most precious asset in your house is your kids.
That's right.
Where are you going to put it?
I'd put one in every single bedroom.
Okay.
So we're going to put one in here, we're going to put one in here, we're going to put one in here, and we're going to have one in here. And we'd put one in the bathroom, put one in each room.
Great. Okay, what about downstairs?
Now downstairs, again, one outside of every bedroom. So we have a bedroom, we have a study, and we got a bathroom here. So the perfect place to put one would be, say, maybe right here in this hallway.
Okay.
Dining room, living room, and kitchen, they should all have one as well.
Okay.
Now in the living room, we've got a wood stove and we got a fireplace, so you wouldn't want to put it too close to that. A lot of smoke coming out. Let's say you open that wood stove
Right.
or that fireplace, you throw a log in there, all the smoke comes out. You don't want a smoke detector going off all the time. So you're going to want to put it close by, but say, you know, not too close.
Okay.
So we're going to have one there. We're going to put one in the kitchen, remember? Not above the stove and not
Yeah.
above the toaster.
Right.
How many times you put a piece of toast in the toaster?
Many times.
It gets burnt. So we're going to put a smoke detector right there.
Okay.
In the dining room, same thing. So
Okay.
another one.
Now, Grandma's living downstairs.
Grandma's living downstairs. It wouldn't hurt to put one in her bedroom either.
Let's do it.
So let's do that. Let's put one right in here, right beside the door in her bedroom.
Okay. We're going downstairs here. We may want one maybe. How about at the top of the stairs?
At the top of the stairs, and there's a good reason for that, because the smoke is going to travel, it's going to come up, and that's the highest point of that basement, especially if your door's upstairs and not downstairs.
That's right. And you could also put another one downstairs by your water heater, by your dryer.
That's right.
Okay, good. Let's talk about the next item on the legend, and that is a carbon monoxide detector. You can put that for, let's say, a refrigerator that may be run by propane. It may be by a propane gas dryer. It may be by a propane hot water heater. It might be by a wood stove, or maybe a propane insert, or maybe upstairs we've got a kerosene heater right here just to do some extra heat upstairs. Where would you put a carbon monoxide detector?
First place in this house here, I'm going to put one in between the kitchen and in between the living room.
Okay.
So we're going to put one right here. Because of this here, and because of the kitchen, maybe your stove, you know, propane, or your refrigerator, or whatever it might be. Now, your hot water heater, maybe it's run off propane.
Yeah.
Is it in the basement, or maybe it's here in this bathroom downstairs?
That's right, yeah.
Wherever it might be, I'd put one there as well.
Okay.
Same with the upstairs.
Okay. Because we're putting maybe some kerosene heater up here. Absolutely.
Put it right there in that main room, right there above your fire extinguisher.
Okay. Okay. Right there, right beside your smoke detector.
Right.
Sounds great. Okay. Let's talk about evacuation routes. Let's do some trying on that.
All right.
Let's say that we've got folks upstairs and we need to get them out of the bedrooms, because usually that's when fires are, not during the daytime, it's at night. Many times home fires are, at least when people are home. And so we've got to get that precious asset, your children, out of the house. So let's get them out of the house. And so we're going to look at a primary evacuation route and a secondary evacuation route. So let's go, and we're going to say Susie's in this room, so we're going to send Susie on downstairs. She's going to come out right here and come on out the front door. Then we got Johnny, he's in here, we're going to send him out, and we're going to send him out the front door. And Sissy, she's over here, we're going to send her out, and she's going to run on out. She's going to come out the front door, and Mom and Dad make sure everybody's out. They come on down, they're coming out, and they're coming out the front door. Then we got Grandma. Grandma's right here, she comes on out, she's coming out that front door. But let's say that the fire is right here.
At the bottom of the stairs.
We got a big fire going on in the living room. Are you going to send everybody out down these stairs?
Absolutely not.
No, absolutely. So we need a secondary evacuation route, and we can do that out the windows. And there's something really neat. It's not that expensive. It's very effective, and that's just a little ladder that you can throw out. It collapses. You can put it in a little case, undo that case, Velcro, open the window, knock out the screen, sit this first part right here in the windowsill, toss it out, and you've got a ladder right here. And everybody sticks that outside their windows, and they then exit out upstairs, those 4 bedrooms. Now, one of the problems that we have, Walter, is when we have fires, and we think maybe he's outside, so everybody's outside wandering around here and there, and Dad goes, "Where's Johnny?" Mom goes, "I don't know, I haven't seen him." "Mom, have you seen Johnny?" "Sissy, have you seen Johnny?" Nobody's seen Johnny. Mom and Dad, or Dad runs back in, and they're trying to figure out what it is, and what can happen?
Dad could actually die.
Dad can die. He sure can. And so what we want to do is we want to have a common location that everybody can meet. And so you want to find an area that is easy to get to. It's not too far from the house, but let's say, what about going back here to the garage?
That's not a good place.
Why not?
Because it's too close to the house, and there's a big
Okay.
possibility it could catch on fire.
Absolutely. So don't have everybody go to an area that may be close to the house or that it could catch on fire. What about sending them over to the neighbor's house? I don't like that. It's too far away. We can't control it. Let's send them on out. We might send them out to the oak tree. We might send them out to the mailbox. And so we want to make sure that we send everybody out to an area that everybody knows about. Because see, if we didn't do that, Johnny may have run out his window and ran over to Fido's doghouse. And everybody's going around trying to find Johnny, and he's hiding in the doghouse with Fido. And so you want to make sure everybody has that common location everyone goes to. Anything else you can think of, Walter?
Not that I can think of.
All right. home evacuation plans are extremely important. I encourage everyone to have that home evacuation plan and test it. Have a test once a month. Dad, blow the whistle. Everybody jumps up, runs out the primary, or he blows the whistle twice. That means secondary. Everybody hits the secondary. Everybody tries their ladder, make sure it's working. Everybody runs, meets at the mailbox, the oak tree, or maybe over at the swing set. Also, we want to make sure that we're testing those smoke detectors. We want to test those extinguishers, those carbon monoxide testers once a month, and definitely on an annual basis for a good test. So I encourage y'all, take the time, sit down with everybody, mom and dad, make out a plan, draw this out, and it's amazing. We recently went to a school, and every October we go to the local elementary school and we do a fire prevention program. And every year we go in and we take this and we send this home with the kids. And the next day the kids are required to bring it back in. And I'm telling you, these kids are doing great work. They've gone home, they've done all what we've done here, worked it out, mom and dad have signed it, comes back into the classroom the next day, and we're able to help them set up a program that everybody's safe. In the early part of American history, the kitchen was a huge issue from a standpoint of fire safety because they had open flame. And so they actually didn't have their kitchens inside the house, they had their kitchens outside the house. And what was that reason, Walter?
Number one, for the heat. The other one was fire safety, and as well as insurance.
That's right. Back in the early part of American history, they had house fire insurance, but the insurance companies would not cover if they had the kitchen inside the house. And it was actually during James Madison's time, and James Madison was our 4th president of the United States. And it was during his time that he actually, in Orange, Virginia, went and moved the kitchen from outside of the home to inside the home because he had fire insurance to cover it when they made that change. So even today, as we pull that kitchen inside, we may not have the open flame, we may not have the heat exposure due to it, and we have insurance coverage. What are some of the problems? And that's what we'd like to look at. What's the problem here, Walter, when we look at this stove?
First problem we have right here is this handle sticking out.
That's exactly right. What's the problem with this handle?
Kids walk by, run by, kick it, the dog runs by, tail hits it, then you end up with...
What about mom as she's working along here and she comes and bumps it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Be sure and keep your handles turned in. We don't want those out because as young'un comes up, he grabs a hold of this, he wonders what that is, and he pulls it, and he drops scalding water on top of him or whatever it may be, or the pot hits him in the head or whatever. But keep the handles good and out of the way. If we do have a fire on the stove, and the stove is where we usually see the major part of our kitchen fires, how do we handle it? There's fires that are on top of the stove, and there's fires are within the oven. And what I'd like to do is talk about both of those areas. Walter, what's some things we can do if we're heating this up? Let's say that we're cooking and we're using oil, and let's say that we're using coconut oil. One of the problems with coconut oil, and we found coconut oils as having some huge health benefits, but what's the problem with cooking with coconut oil?
Extremely flammable.
The low flame rate. And so what happens is mom's used to cooking at a certain temperature on the stove, but it has a lower flash point, and so that coconut oil can catch on fire a lot quicker. And so as mom steps away, she's working at the sink, or she may have gone upstairs to check on something, she comes downstairs, and here's a huge fire right here because the coconut oil caught on fire. Or it could be any kind of oil that you're using. What do we do, Walter, in case we have a fire?
First thing we want to do is we want to be able to turn the burner off. And if we can't reach the burner to turn it off, we want to take a towel.
Okay, show us how to do it. What are we going to do with it?
We're going to take this towel here that we have, and we're going to want to put it and soak it in water. But then we want to make sure we wring all of the water out. We don't want any water. So wring as much as you can out. Then we want to take it, and we want to take it and just lay it this way here, so you're protecting yourself so you don't get burnt, and you want to cover that.
Now, how's that going to work?
It's going to take the oxygen out from the flames.
That's right. What are the components? There's something called a fire what?
fire triangle.
That's right.
Fire triangle consists of heat, oxygen, and fuel.
And so if you take any one part of that triangle away, what happens?
Break that chain and then fire goes out.
That's right. What's some other things we can do?
Another thing you can do is you can use a fire extinguisher.
Absolutely. What kind of fire extinguisher do we want to use if we're using grease?
We want to use a fire extinguisher
Or a,
or a BC.
what else can we use?
We could use fire ice.
Yeah, tell us about fire ice, Walter.
Fire ice is a little bit of a gel-like solution, and basically what it is a little powder, and you take that powder and mix it with water. When you mix it with water, you can put it onto the fire and it'll put it out. You can actually take your hand and you can make up this solution of a gel-like liquid, and you can stick your hand inside it. You can take a torch and put it at your hand and you won't even feel the heat on the other side.
That's right.
It's amazing stuff.
What's some other things in the kitchen? So we can squirt it with this little bottle. We can put the fire ice in here, squirt it, and it'll actually put out the fire. What's some other things in the kitchen that you can grab a hold of?
Flour.
Flour. So what's happening when we throw the flour on there?
It's cutting out the oxygen.
Takes out the oxygen. What else can we grab?
Salt.
Salt, okay. We can grab some salt, just regular old kitchen salt, take it, open it, and put the salt on there. What else can we do?
Baking soda.
Baking soda, that's another big one that folks have used for many years. And you can take that, put the baking soda on there. And there's one other one, and that is just put the top on the pot.
That works.
And that's going to displace the oxygen. The fire's going to go out. Another area that we see fires in the kitchen, as we talked about, is in the oven. And we would get fire calls, and it would be toned out, and we're getting in the truck, and you know, the tones go off. We're jumping out of the fire hall, and we're jumping in the fire truck, and we're hearing dispatch say, kitchen fire, oven fire. Well, what we do is just get on the radio and call back to dispatch and say, dispatch, have the person turn the stove off and don't open the door. So they got a fire going on in here. All they need to do is just turn the oven off. That's going to not keep putting heat on it. And then when we open this door, what are we doing?
We're giving it oxygen.
Yeah, we're giving it a lot of oxygen. That fire loves that oxygen. So just leave the door closed. That fire is going to use up that oxygen. And what would happen when we got there? The fire was out. We didn't even have to put the fire out. All they had to do was just don't open that door and turn it off. And that's it. It's pretty easy. Unfortunately, we had a fire in our area just this year, and a lady was cooking in the kitchen, and she had a fire on top of her stove, and she didn't understand or didn't know these few simple items. We're out in the country, and it took a while for the fire department to get there, and what happened? The whole house burned down. Right. The whole house burned down because she had a skillet catch on fire. All she had to do was throw a wet rag on there, put the top on the pot, throw some baking soda, some flour, use an extinguisher, but don't use water. Don't run over to the sink and put water on it. Why not?
It is going to explode.
That's right. What happens is this fire is so hot that when you put that water on, we can actually start separating that hydrogen and oxygen, and the hydrogen starts exploding. And it's got the oxygen in there too as an accelerant. So don't put water. I remember when I was a young boy, and I was at a neighbor's house or a friend's house, and she had a pot on the stove. She had gone to the store, and we were in the kitchen playing, and we looked over, and there was a fire just going over here. So I grabbed that thing, I ran over to the sink, and I poured the water on it, and went, whoo, and it burned all the curtains. And then I took off out the door with this thing, big old flame going. I didn't understand those simple little principles of just throw a wet rag on there, again, not sopping wet, or putting something simple to take the oxygen away.
All right, we want to talk about what happens when you catch on fire. What do you want to do and what do you not want to do? Maybe you're in your kitchen, or maybe you're by the fireplace, or you caught fire by a candle or a lamp, or maybe you're outside at a campfire, or you're burning some brush. But what happens when you catch on fire? What do you want to do to put that fire out? One thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to run, because when you run, you're giving that fire more oxygen, which causes the fire to increase in size. and burn more intensely. But what you do want to do is you want to stop, you want to drop to the ground, and you want to roll, thus causing the fire to be smothered and taking out one of the three things in the fire triangle: oxygen.
When we first moved to our mountain home, in order to get away, get off the grid, we went about a year and a half without any electricity while we were setting up and getting ready for our power source. And during that year and a half, or a little more, we ran our house for light off of lanterns and off of candles. And it was really neat. We enjoyed it. We could sit there at night and enjoy the candlelight and enjoy reading by candlelight. But candles are dangerous if you're not careful. There's a couple safety items I'd like to cover on open flame. And the first one would be like a lantern like this. And a lot of times when we are running a house without electricity and we have lanterns, we have them up on the walls. They might be sitting here or they might be on tables. But a lot of times folks have them up here. And it's very easy when you're walking by, you're lifting something, to bump that lantern. And it can topple over and fall. If you have a glass bottom like this, now a lot of them have a metal bottom, but if you have a glass bottom and you're walking down the stairs and trip and fall, or if you're walking and trip over a rug or a wire or whatever, you've actually got a Molotov cocktail. Because when you're carrying this and you fall, it breaks the light, the flame then can ignite the oil, and you've got a very tough fire. Another area on the lamps is don't touch them, the globe, because the globe can be quite hot and you can get you a good burn that way. With another area with these lamps, especially I noticed with these that are on the walls, some folks will have them up here and they've got and you'll notice that it gets hot up on the roof and the ceiling. And so you want to be careful that you have it low enough on the wall that heat, that direct heat off the top of it, isn't going to dry out what's going on up in the ceiling and cause it to be more brittle and cause it to be more prone to catch on fire. Another one is lamps, is candles. What's some problems with candles, Walter?
Candles, kids, pets, putting them too close to curtains.
Yes.
Lampshades.
That's right, lampshades are a good one. Yes, or what about tablecloths?
Tablecloths as well.
That's right. And be careful with children and pets, because the kids are running through the house and they bump the lantern or they bump the candle, and they can set a fire. Candles and lanterns are great. They really make a homey situation. I think it pulls the family together. Not having that distraction of lights, and we can go back to that simple living. But there is a fire safety issue. It's not a problem. Just be safe. Oftentimes when folks move out to the country, they'll use propane as a fuel source instead of electricity. With electricity, they are dependent on other folks, and so they'd like to get off the grid. And with propane, they can still have their energy but not have to worry about depending on other folks at that time-specific issue. Areas that they may use it for heating. They may use it for hot water heating. They may use it for refrigeration, for the refrigerator. They may also use it for cooking, for their stove or for their oven. The propane tanks are very safe. You can either have a propane tank that's above ground, such as this one, or you can have it underground. An underground tank has the advantage, if you do have a house fire, you don't have to worry as much about the propane tank exploding or having some challenges over in that region because it's underground. Propane is heavier in air, so it's going to go down to the ground. And because of that, when you look at placement of your water heater or your refrigerator or whatever, you want to make sure that you're within code on how many inches off the ground that pilot is. And check with your local building inspector, your building code, to find out what your local area calls for. Propane can be silent though. You can be asleep at night, have a leak in the house, and you wake up and you smell this smell. It's not the propane, it's a chemical that they put in there that has that smell of sulfur or rotten eggs. When you smell that smell, don't turn the light on, Don't shut a door. Don't do anything that could be a spark. Get up out of bed, call your family, plan this just as you would a fire escape drill. Everybody gets out of the house, they don't shut one door, get out, go over to your propane tank and turn it off. Because propane can explode at just 4% of the volume in the air. The oxygen we breathe is 21%. So if you have just 4% of propane, it can explode. And I tell you, a propane explosion can just blow your house apart. The other thing to take in mind is when you're coming home and you open up that door and you smell something and you smell that rotten egg smell, just stop. Don't go in and research and try to figure out where it is. Don't shut that door back. Back up, walk back to your propane tank, turn it off. Don't use a cell phone. Don't use a telephone when you're in the house. Don't do anything that may cause a spark because you can have an explosion. Now before you open the top, you want to be careful because wasps and yellow jackets love the smell of propane. So you want to be careful. It's not surprising to find a wasp nest inside. So when you open it, you kind of want to be careful because you just may have a huge old wasp nest sitting right there. But what you want to do is you take it and you just turn this off right here. And that's it. It's turned off. And then you can just close it on down. As a father and a homeowner living out in the country, my biggest concern is electrical. As we look at electrical cords can be a big issue. Back years ago, when I first started doing fire safety with school kids, we saw a lot of folks who would place their extension cord underneath a rug, such as this right here. The problem with the rug is where folks will place that rug on top of the extension cord to keep it from someone stepping on it, tripping, or whatever. But what's happening is, as they walk on that rug, it chafes the cord. And when it chafes the cord, the integrity of the cord starts breaking down, and your two wires can come together, and that can start a fire. Walter, we don't see those kind of fires today like we used to, but it's still an issue that we have to be careful of. Another area, what's another area of extension cords or electrical cords that we need to be careful of?
Vacuum cleaners are a big one. They get eaten up in the vacuum cleaner and the cords get exposed. Another one might be shock cords.
Absolutely.
It might be an old lamp cord that hasn't been replaced.
Old lamp cords are a big problem. When we have frayed cords, it may be dry rotted, it might be in somewhere where it was chafed. That then is going to cause a problem with it being a big possibility of catching on fire and arcing over. Another one that we find is where a person will take that cord, and how often have we seen when we're using the vacuum cleaner or we're finished using the drill and we'll take that cord and we just pull the cord. Well, what happens is it pulls on the cord, but especially at the plug. Whenever you unplug a cord, you want to pull it from the plug because you're breaking down that cord here, and you want to make sure that you've got good integrity there, good security. And so when pulling a plug out, pull that plug out by the hand. Another item with cords is children. Make sure that if you have children around the house, put that little that little safety cap for the child in there. I remember I was at my grandmother's when I was a child. I was about 2 years old, and I remember it very distinctly. I went into the bathroom and grandmother had some bobby pins. I thought, well, that looks interesting. And so I took the bobby pin and I opened it up and I stuck it into the electrical socket. Now, what do you think happened? I definitely got charged up.
Lit up a little bit.
Burnt my hand plumb up. So you want to make sure, as you have electrical cords where there's children around, electrical sockets, make sure those areas are protected, whether you have a total cover over that socket or whether you have the little cap that goes inside of there. Another area that I'm concerned with, that is of irons. An iron is a great way to start a fire, in that whether that you lay it and it falls down, on the ironing board or on the floor, that can cause a fire. Or again, a lot of problems are in this region right here that we have breaking down of that electrical cord. And if you walk off away from it, something's in the kitchen and it's cooking, and so you walk away, and a child comes through and knocks it, or a dog comes through and knocks it off, that can cause the fire. Or when it's not attended, it could catch on fire. Be very careful with irons. The other one is the, what's this?
Curling iron.
Curling iron. How often, Walter, have we left the house on the way to church and we said,
Did you turn the curling iron off?
yeah, did you turn the curling iron off? One time I remember when y'all were young, we were on the way to church, and Mom says, you know what, I don't think I turned the iron off. No, I'm pretty sure I didn't turn the iron off. So we got on the phone, called our neighbor, and we were again, we're out in the country, y'all. And so we were driving quite a ways to church. You remember that?
I remember.
Who did
it.
we call?
Called the neighbors.
Called the neighbors, called Miss Whitson.
That's right.
And Miss Whitson was very understanding, because why? She'd had a house burned
That's
down one
right.
time. And so she went, got in the house, and sure enough, the gals had left the curling iron plugged in. And great way to start a fire. When I buy curling irons for my two gals, for my wife and my daughter, I make sure that they got a timer for two reasons. One, to save electricity if they forget to turn it off or they get busy doing something. But the other is, if they forget to turn it off, it could cause a fire. It could lay over and start something on fire because of the heat. The other one that I don't also see as often as I used to, and that is the electrical heaters. And they're about this wide and about this tall. Y'all remember those back in the 60s and the 70s. And Walter, what happened?
It burned the back of the door.
Burned the back of the door. Fortunately, we were at home. It was in the bathroom. The contractor had placed the heater behind the bathroom door. One of the kids had opened the bathroom door and left it. The heater was on. It was wintertime.
I started smelling something.
Yeah, we started smelling something, went back, and it plumb burnt the back of the door. Fortunately, it didn't catch the door on fire, but it very easily could have. And the other problem we have is where in the summertime, moms or grandmoms will move furniture around, and because they like to change things. Well, when it starts to get cold, they turn on that wall heater or that floor heater, and they forget that they placed some type of furniture, a chair or some other type of furniture in front of it. It heats up and it catches on fire. And it's usually in October, November when we get those kind of fires, because they came on with the cold, and we hadn't moved the furniture yet. We forgot it was there, and we have a house fire. And we used to have a lot of those. Again, we don't have those as much anymore, and I believe fire prevention education is really helping in that area. Another area that we have problems with the electrical is at the breaker box. And this is a fuse box. What we see today is breaker boxes, but if a person goes and they buy an older home, they may encounter a box like this where there's fuses. And these are more prone, I find, for house fires, and the biggest problem is the people who use them. Let's say that one of these fuses blows. The difference in these fuses and our breaker boxes at home today is if our breaker blows, we can just flip the switch and the power comes right back on. But if you have a short with a fuse box, and this type of fuse will blow, then you have to take that fuse out, just like on your car. If your fuse breaks on your car, you got to pull that out and put a new fuse on it. Unless you get one of these newer fuses that has this little white little button here, and you can re-push that button and it resets the fuse just like the fuses that we have in our breaker boxes. But what happens is, let's say it's Friday evening and the fuse blows, and you don't have any more fuses like these as a spare. What the folks would do is they would pull this main breaker, turn this out, and they put a penny in there. And they'd turn it back on, and all this would do is just hold that penny in, and it crossed over and made the circuit closed. Therefore, you had power. But the problem was something caused that to blow that fuse before. So it meant there was a short or something was going on. And now you don't have that safety with that fuse. And so you've got full power going through, and that's where a fire starts. And so you never want to place anything underneath this to bypass that fuse, because your house can burn down. And so what happens is folks just have extra fuses. Again, this one here, you just push the button and it resets, or you just put it in a fuse. Then there's boxes like this where you pull this out and they have these little fuses in it and you stick these in. And what folks would do is they take a good piece of aluminum foil and put over these two ends here and slide it back in, or plumb across this, and stick it in there. And again, you had a closed circuit. But the problem, whatever threw that breaker at first, it's prone to happen again, and that'll burn your house down. So fuse boxes, I'm concerned with them not because of the safety of the fuse boxes, but the safety of what is that person doing with that fuse once it blows. The breaker boxes today, which have the breakers, as long as if you ever find that breaker starting to get a little weak and it's prone to pop, you just need to pull that breaker, put a new breaker in there, and that'll take care of it. You also want to make sure that you align up the fuses or the breakers with whatever you're running. That you don't, let's say that you're throwing blowing a fuse or throwing a breaker, and the person says, well, let me just get a more powerful one in, and I'll screw that one in, and it won't blow then. But still, something was going on. That fuse or that breaker in the modern day box is matched up with the size of wiring that you're using. And if you put a stronger fuse or a stronger breaker and it doesn't trip like it's supposed to, then that can then cause a fire. So you want to make sure that if you aren't familiar with electricity, that you work with an electrician to make sure that you size your fuses or size your breakers out based on what you're wiring or what you're pulling in that area. Another area that I find, if let's say you don't have home insurance or fire insurance, to me the safest thing to do, and my daddy did it when I grew up, if we ever went out of town on vacation or whatever, Dad would pull whatever breakers that were not pertinent. And I did it for years. Now you don't throw the main breaker because you may have a freezer or a refrigerator going. But we would throw all the other breakers or pull all the other fuses out while we were gone. So if we had a short somewhere, then it wouldn't cause a problem while we were gone because we had taken the current away. In our home today, our refrigerator is run by propane. So we don't have to worry about the issue of electricity. For us, I have two choices. I can either throw my breaker or I can just turn my inverter off because we're off the grid and we charge up those batteries with the inverter. I just turn my inverter off every time I leave the home. When we go to work, that inverter's turned off. When we go to church, that inverter's turned off. So there's no potential for that power to come to the house. To me, that's a weak link. And there's something called controllables and non-controllables. And that's an issue that I can control. Take that power away from that area while I'm gone, and then that's an issue that I can control while I'm gone, and there's not going to be a fire. When moving from the city to the country, one of the big questions is how do I do a wood stove? Is there a concern regarding fire safety? And Walter and I like to spend a few minutes today looking at how we can share with y'all our experiences, some things from the fire marshal's office that will show you how to have a wood stove and be safe. Wood stoves are really, really neat. They provide warmth to your home. It's inexpensive. It's a way to get exercise, and if you have them where you can open the door and see the fire, it's kind of neat to have that open fire for the family. Walter, why don't you share with us some do's and don'ts from the fire marshal's office?
All right. There are several principal do's and don'ts. One thing we want to make sure that we do is make sure that there is enough clearance between the stove and combustible materials, including floors, walls, and ceilings.
That's an area that we see. When we go in to a home that has a wood stove, that's probably the second biggest cause of fire with a wood stove, and that's improper wood stove placement.
Another one is we want to make sure that we place the stove on a non-combustible, fire-resistant base. We also want to have a mason or other competent person inspect the chimney, burn only dry, well-seasoned wood, and consider opening a window or crack for ventilation. Also, we want to dispose of ashes in a closed metal container outside of the house.
The biggest cause that we see on wood stove fires is the issue of chimney fires. And chimney fires is something that you really shouldn't have to worry about. There's a couple do's and don'ts there that we'll cover, but that's probably the biggest target area. And choosing the proper wood is really the key. You want seasoned wood, wood that you've cut, it's had time to season out, because if it's green wood, it has the sap still in it, you've got a lot of creosote issues, and that then collects on the chimney wall, and then it catches on fire. And then you get a fire up in the chimney, and that can cause issues where you've got your chimney can crack, and then you can then have issues in the attic.
That's right. Those are some of the do's that we want to make sure that we do. Other things that we don't want to do is we don't want to connect a wood stove to a chimney serving other appliances that are burning other fuels. We also don't want to start a stove with flammable liquids such as gasoline. And we don't want to burn trash in a stove. Doing this can start a chimney fire.
How does it do that, Walter?
The flames are really high, and the trash is more of an accelerant than the wood is, so thus causing your creosote in the chimney to catch on fire.
That's right. I can remember back when I first started firefighting, actually going to houses where there had fires, or seeing houses where folks decided they wanted a wood stove, say in the living room, and they didn't have a chimney there. So what they would do is they would remove the glass out of the window, put in a piece of plywood, cut a hole just big enough to stick the flue out. Well, you can imagine the heat from the flue then radiates, catches the plywood on fire, and you get a chimney fire, or actually a house fire from the chimney.
Right.
Yeah. Again, wood stoves are very safe for the home, but I like to again cover an item that's very important, and that's location. Where you place that stove within the home. If you put a wood stove inside the house, you have a couple options. You can put a wood stove in the house, or you can, as this one here is an external wood stove, you can place the wood stove outside of the house, which eliminates two major concerns. Walter, cover with us stove location. What should we do? What's the fire marshal's recommendation on where we should place that stove based on dimensions away from things?
Okay, it says the stove should be located on a non-combustible floor, or an approved floor protection material must be placed under the stove. So that's one very important thing to remember. Floor protection should extend out 6 to 12 inches from the sides or the back of the stove, and it should extend out 18 inches from the front where the wood is loaded.
Now, why do you think that is, out front 18 inches?
Because of ashes and coals that might fall out of the firebox onto the floor. The third thing is the stove should be placed at least 36 inches away from any combustible materials. If not, fire-resistant materials must be used to try to protect woodwork and other combustible materials that might be around the stove.
So what you can do is, if you're placing your wood stove closer than that distance to a material, you want to put a fire retardant material between the stove and that wall that will attach to that wall that will provide a barrier for that heat.
Exactly.
And our next item is setup and maintenance of your wood stove. Walter, tell us again some issues that the fire marshal looks at setup and maintenance of a wood stove. And again, these can change state by state. So be sure and check what your local requirements are, your local codes, to make sure you're complying within your own state's codes.
That's right. The following points here concerning your stovepipe and chimney should be carefully checked during the initial setup and maintenance of all your stoves. The stovepipe should be 22 or 24 gauge metal. Is at least 18 inches between the top of the stovepipe and the ceiling, or any other combustible material where you go up with your stovepipe and then go out through the wall. From the top of that to your ceiling should be at least 18 inches. The stovepipe enters the chimney higher than the outlet of the stove firebox. The stovepipe does not extend into the chimney flue lining, so you'll make sure that that doesn't happen either. The inside thimble diameter should be the same size as the stovepipe so that you have a snug fit.
Walter, that's a problem that we see. We see older homes which had a thimble in the wall. People come in, put a different wood stove that was there than was there before. It has maybe a different size pipe, And so they stick a new pipe in there, and sometimes we see a problem with it just not being a snug fit, and that can cause several problems. It can cause some problems with carbon monoxide. It can cause problems with fire.
That's right. A UL approved all fuel metal chimney is used when a masonry chimney is not available or practical. The chimney should extend at least 3 feet above the highest point where it passes through the roof and 2 feet above any portion of the building within 10 horizontal feet of the chimney. The chimney flue lining should not be blocked, and the chimney flue pipe should be kept clean at all times. If you connect your stove to an existing chimney, you should also make sure that you check that chimney to make sure it's clean before you use that stove.
That's right. Our next item we'll cover is wood seasoning. Come on over to the wood pile. I would say your single most important item on wood stove safety is seasoning your wood. The rule of thumb is if you can season your wood for 1 year. What that means is cut the wood, split that wood, and let it sit for 1 year. What happens is when you cut your wood and you leave the sap up in the wood, and what that means is if you cut the tree and immediately use that wood with the sap up, that sap then is prone to get up into your chimney. Then that sap will catch on fire, which will be a fuel, and that will then cause a chimney fire. So if you're in the East Coast, I would say your woods of choice would be oak, would be hickory, but my favorite is locust. Locust has the same BTU as soft coal, and that will put out a hot fire and will last much through the night, if not all night long. Out west, from what I understand, your best wood is tamarack.
Starting a fire in your wood stove is really simple and easy. One thing you want to make sure that you don't do, though, is to use flammable liquids such as gasoline. However, you can use things such as kindling that you've been able to chop up, such as this old piece of siding here, or maybe an old piece of 2x4, or even pieces of a log that you've chopped up really small. You can take that and even wrap some newspaper up that you have, put it underneath of it, put the kindling on top, start your fire, and as your fire grows, slowly put larger logs onto it. Once you have a good roaring fire such as we have here, then you can go ahead and take a larger log such as this and stick it on top of the fire.
The other critical item that you need to do in order to prevent chimney fires, besides making sure your wood is seasoned, and that is chimney maintenance. You can do that 2 ways. The old timers here in the mountains of the Appalachia, what they would do is they would heat up their fire real good once a day, and that would just burn off the soot in their chimneys. But another item that you want to do is at least once a year, now it's recommended twice a year, prior to starting using wood in the fall, and then after your season, just as to make sure, but definitely prior to using your wood stove in the fall, is to clean your chimney. You can hire a chimney sweep. They can come in and do it. What they use is there's various ways. There's big brushes that they can go in and clean that. They can use items that expand out and clean it, or you can do it yourself. Just go to your local hardware store, get you the cleaning items, and it's easy to do. Just climb up on the roof, take your cap off, and go down and clean the sides of the walls. And the walls are kind of like hardening of the arteries. And so what you do is you just go through and scrape off the creosote which is built up, and we can kind of look right here to see how to do that. It'd be like going and scraping this area off right here, the area off in here. You're just scraping off that creosote, and it falls down. You can close it up, and it doesn't cause a whole lot of mess in the house. You can do it very clean where it doesn't mess the house up, especially in a wood stove, and that will prevent you from a chimney fire. The next item we're going to explore is if you do get a chimney fire, what do you do? You may ask, how do I know if I have a chimney fire? Well, it's pretty simple. When you have a flue fire going or a chimney fire going, it's going to be really loud. It's going to sound like an airplane's landing on your roof or flying right over, or a train's going right over your house. You're going to know it. The chimney fire, putting the chimney fire out is safe, chimney fires are very dangerous. And so you want to be assertive, aggressive, and what you want to do, the first thing is to close off the damper on the pipe and then close off any air intakes that you may have on your specific wood stove. The next thing I'd recommend is call your local fire department. I would much rather have someone call and send my guys out to fight a chimney fire that the family has already put out than to have to worry about putting that fire out for that person. The next thing you can look at is they make a product, it looks like your just flare that you have on the side of the road. You take it, you start it just like a flare. What you're going to do is open that door, toss it in, and then open the flue up on the chimney, or the little the flue there. This is going to put up a gas that's going to smother that fire up into the chimney. If you don't have one of these, the next item you can do, which we used to do for many years when I started out as a firefighter, I would carry these in the pockets of my turnout coats in the wintertime. In the case we had a chimney fire, I had 2 of them. First thing we would do is get to that house, ladder that roof, go on up, toss one in, toss the second one in, and what's in here is exactly the same product that's in your fire extinguisher. As it's dropping down into the flue, it's hot. There's a huge fire in there, and it's going to melt this bag, the carrier, and then it's going to disperse this extinguishing agent, which is going to put the fire out. Again, toss 1, toss 2, and it should put that fire out. And all you do is just get some dry chemical, get you a little baggie, fill it up, and just have a couple of them ready in case you do have a chimney fire. Hopefully you'll never have to use it. If you don't have these items, the next item that you can do, and I don't like this one as much, but definitely it can work, is you can go and you need to have your flue open, and you just crack the door on your wood stove and then just spray this up in there. It can be a little messy. The reason I don't like it is because it can be a little messy out, but I'd much rather have a little mess of an extinguishing agent coming out into your living room or wherever you have your wood stove than to have it cause your house to catch on fire. The last resort, put water on it. If you put water into your chimney fire, there's a good chance it's going to crack your chimney. What that means is you're going to have to put a new chimney in. So I'd much rather, though, see you put water in on that and put it in a new chimney. If you don't have these items to put the fire out, extinguish that fire, take a hose, put water in there. It's going to put it out, but there's a good chance you're going to have to put a brand new chimney in. In the event you do have a chimney fire, you want to make sure that you do have it inspected. Many insurance companies will require, if you have a chimney fire, they will not allow you to use that chimney again or cover you under their insurance unless you go in and have that chimney inspected. What does that involve? There's companies that will go, they'll drop actually a video camera down into your chimney and actually take a look as they go down through, as it turns, coming on down, and making sure there's no cracks in that chimney or in that liner but from that chimney fire. And then after that inspection, your insurance company will allow you to run a fire. Well, you can run a fire, but if you have a fire in that chimney, let's say your house catches on fire, that insurance company will not cover your house fire. If you don't have house insurance, it's still a good idea to make sure that chimney's safe. Why? Your family's in that house. The number one thing you want to take care of. Another time that you also want to take a look and maybe have a chimney inspection is if you're moving into a new home that you haven't lived in before. An older home, it's just good and safe. You know, when you buy a house, you may have a building inspector to come in and inspect that home, just like you may have your land surveyed to make sure you know what you have. Another good piece of insurance is when you buy that older home, have someone come in and inspect that chimney to make sure your family's going to be safe when you put that wood stove in there. Folks will ask me, Walt, how do I know when to get out of the house? How long can I fight that fire inside before I have to get out of the house and start fighting outside? I encourage folks not to stay in the house long because you don't have the equipment. Walter and my turnouts are between $1,500 and $2,000 just for the clothes that we wear. Our air packs that we wear are $5,000 a piece. And I do not at all encourage folks to be inside of a house fighting fire very long in those conditions. Even more so today than when I started fighting fire 28 years ago, because what you have is the chemicals we have in our carpets, our wallpapers, our garbage cans, our furniture is extremely deadly. And so if you stay in there and try to fight that fire, you may not get out because those chemicals will make you go unconscious. Or we could have a flashover. And that's the case where the gases heat up and they actually ignite, like gasoline would ignite, and or propane would ignite. And we're dealing with temperatures that are 1,000, 1,200 degrees or more that's going to run about this high and up, and it will totally kill a person, no question. So if you have a little trash can fire, or if you have a small fire on the stove that you want to hit it with an extinguisher, that's okay. But if you start getting a growing fire, I encourage you to get out of the house. Get your family out of the house. Don't go back in. Well, once you're out, can you do anything? It wasn't long ago we got a call, and we got there, and the fire was almost totally out. A huge living room. Walter, what would you say? We're dealing with a living room that was a good 40 feet by 40 feet. Large living room. It was burnt. Smoke damage throughout the house. Basement sustained fire damage. And the gentleman was woke up in the middle of the night by, what do you think? A smoke detector. And he got his kids out, he got his wife out, and he ran outside and he grabbed a garden hose. Walter, show him what he did. He got in, broke the glass in that living room, and he started going in. Go up a little closer, Walter. And he actually caused that fire to go out. When we got there, that fire was just a bit of a smolder, and he was extremely successful by just putting that there. Walter, show us what a fog stream does, and we'll talk a little bit about that. With that fog stream, it's not as good as this nozzle here that we'll talk about a little later, which has a little device that rotates here called a fog nozzle, breaks up those water pellets even finer, but the steam will actually put that fire out better than a straight stream will. And so you can kind of figure out what's working the best. You can show them the difference between a fog and a straight stream. If you have fire that's coming out, heat coming out, I don't encourage you to go and get up close. But be back as far as you can and put that water on that area. Whether you're using the straight stream or the fog stream, you're going to have to play with that and see what is the most effective. I would venture to say that I would probably use more of a straight stream and get more benefit. I can be further away because when I have a fog or a spray, I have to be closer, and it may be too hot for you to be up there with that spray. Come on back, use that straight stream, get that whole area in there good and wet, and I would use more of this straighter stream to do that instead of the wide fog stream with this type of a nozzle. Walter, show us what this nozzle is and what this hose is. This is an 1.5-inch fire hose. This used to be the typical fire hose that we would go into a house fire. Now we're seeing an 1.75-inch and 2-inch line being used, and even greater, into house fires. But this is the standard average fire hose that firemen run in with and put that fire out. This is your typical pistol nozzle. It can give you a fog, and it can also give you a straight stream. And what we'll do is we can make this work to put your house fire out very simply by just taking a little pump, water pump, that will pump into here, that you can pump from 1 to 2 fire lines. You can drop your draft hose into a swimming pool, into a jacuzzi, or into a cistern that you've made or into a creek that's running by. And this will extremely be effective putting that house fire out. When fighting wildland fires, you're protecting both your property in land, but your biggest concern is your home. So you want to, first of all, make sure, as we have spoke, about keeping the fire away from the house. But what we can do to prevent the house from catching on fire is keeping that house cool. We can do that with just a standard garden hose, and it's amazing to see. You can even be in a subdivision where you have homes that are just 30 feet away. Both homes on both sides have totally burned, and a person like Walter here, just doing what he's about to do, will prevent your house from catching on fire. Significant. Some other things that you can do with a garden hose is, and some of the video that we'll show, is where we use agents like the fire ice and different ones, which will coat that house and prevent it from catching on fire. But Walter showed us what we can do just with a garden hose to prevent this house from catching on fire. But before we start, what do we have up here? We have lines coming to the house. Make sure that you're keeping away from those lines because we don't want you to get electrocuted. So work around those lines, but make sure that you're keeping that roof and the side of the house all the way around good and coated if we're having challenges with forest fires coming in and heating up the area. I've fought many fires before with the large hoses in neighbors' houses which were exposed to that heat, but we didn't have the manpower to go and also protect that house as well as we wanted to. And those neighbors were just out there with a garden hose doing exactly what Walter's doing to prevent that from catching on fire. Yes, we can put up a fire curtain with a large hose, but we may not have the manpower to do that. And so what Walter's doing here, just keeping that surface good and cool, will prevent this from catching on fire at a lower probability. If you have the opportunity to choose your home structure, you can actually make your home more fire retardant. As we look at probably one of the biggest areas that we see first that's affected is the roof. The most dangerous type of roof is the shingles that are made out of wood. And as embers float into that, get stuck, it will cause those wood shingles to catch on fire. They're beautiful, they look great, but that house is definitely a danger. The best type of roof construction is a metal roof construction. The other thing you want to look at is what is your siding made out of. If you can use a masonry type of siding that's a lap like this, but out of masonry, you'll actually be more fire retardant as that heat comes up to it, and it's less prone to ignite. The next area you want to look at is what is the area of the house look like. A lot of folks will just build the house right in the middle of the woods. They don't cut those trees around, and I understand it. It's pretty, it's nice, but you're a lot more prone to getting your house catching on fire if you have that fuel right up to your house. So as these folks here have done, we've got a few trees here, but that's not too bad. But you want to cut back as they've done back over in here and over in these areas back around the other sides of the house. They've gotten those fuels away from the home, so if a fire comes into that area, a forest fire, and catches those trees out, it crowns out, as further back as you can be, the less prone that radiant heat will come over here and ignite that house. The other thing you want to do, even go back further from where your trees are and keep that area picked up. Just as these folks have done here, is you don't have fallen dead branches or whatever. That's been picked up. As that fire comes in and you have fuels laying on the ground, dead fuels, those guys are going to catch on fire very fast. And if you can have that area nice and clean like this area, that you don't have those fuels, you're a lot less prone to catch on fire. Now, if it's the fall and you have fire coming, go ahead and rake the yard. Get those leaves up. and that will also help. As Walter and I work with the United States Forestry Service, we're seeing a significant change in how they are fighting forest fires and how they're protecting homes. One of the significant changes is where they are not spending as much time cutting around the homes with cutting fire lines and staging to keep that area free from fire. They're going in and they are providing an agent, a fire retardant agent, onto the siding of those homes, the roofs of those homes, and then leaving. And it's really interesting. They're finding that that agent, which may go an inch, 2 inches thick, it is lasting over 24 hours. You could actually have a forest fire come in here and we're not even having the windows break. That is tremendous. And so as we look at ways that we can make your house more fire retardant, more fire resistant, I encourage you to look at using a product such as a foaming agent or a wetting agent. A foaming agent is working better, but putting that, if we see imminent danger, that fire coming in pretty close and it looks like we're not able to control that, have enough time, coat that house, and it doesn't take that long. We're looking at, you can get that whole house done in 30 minutes and you'll be protected at least 24 hours. We're seeing as much as 3 days having fire resistance with these products such as Fire Ice and different ones. And you just pump that onto your walls, onto your roofs, and the house is a lot more fire resistant. Another new technology that we're seeing in the fire service is portable pumps. And it's really neat because we can use a portable pump where you will drop your draft line or hose into a swimming pool, into a jacuzzi, a hot tub, into a local creek or a pond, and you can draft out of that and you can then put water on the house and protect that house by keeping the fuels cool there, the siding or the roofing. You can also take that and you can spray your woods, your grass areas and what all, and keep that area good and wet and cool. You can also make a system where you can actually put pipes in that may run over to that part of the house, may run over to this area, may run over to this area, and work like an extended hose line. And you can pump from that portable pump into that area, and you can take your hose over there, you can take your hose over here, you can take your hose over there, and you can actually fight fire from those other areas and not have to move that pump or your water source from that area. We're also finding those same products are now pumping the foam products or a product that's a wetting agent that we can go, and especially the foam items, we can put that on the sides of the house, on the roof of the house, and that area is now being protected for up to 24 hours, even up to as much as 3 days. The U.S. Forestry Service, again, is finding that lasting at least 24 hours. We can also spread that on the fuels out there, the trees, on the grass, and it will not catch on fire, which is pretty amazing to me. So not only are you bound just to that portable pump and that 1 or 2 inch-and-a-half fire hose that's hooked to that and regular nozzle, regular fireman nozzle, but you also can pump into that line that will go just like in a high-rise. When we hook into those standpipes, you can actually standpipe your area going to different areas, up to the barn, up to the shop, onto the other side of the house, and you can fight fire from those areas without moving that pump. If you're trying to figure out a way to get water, you can go to your local hardware store, get a cistern that's maybe 1,200 gallons. If you put a product like Fire Ice in there, you can actually multiply that 1,200 gallons by 10, and now that's 12,000 gallons, and it's able to provide much, much longer. The regular fire truck is about 1,000 gallons. Now we're looking at the effectiveness of 10 fire trucks sitting at your house, protecting your house, if you put a product like the Fire Ice in that. As we look at fighting wildland fires, or whether it's a house fire, fire behavior is critical for a firefighter. And we need to understand what that fire is going to do, or what it can potentially do, in order for us to be prepared for what it can do. Walter, tell us some of the basic fire behaviors of wildland firefighting? Give us 5 of them.
All right, there's these 5 characteristics that we need to monitor. One is fuel characteristics, continuous fine fuels, and the amount of dead or down fuels that we have.
So that's like we've got a lot of leaves laying out in this area. We've got a lot of down trees. So actually we can spread on through here pretty fast.
Pretty quick.
Because we've got some dead products out here, or dead fuels.
Exactly. The next one we need to look at is fuel moisture, low relative humidity, and you know, less than 25%. The lower the humidity, generally the more available the fine fuels are to carry the fire. And drought conditionals and seasonal drying.
And we're seeing that more and more today. There's part of the country that's getting a lot of rain, but there may be not the guys that are having the fires.
That's right.
But there's parts of the country, like here down in the south right now, or other places in the country that's having drought. They're more prone, even more so than normal, for that fire spread to even be faster.
Right. Fuel temperature is also something that we need to look at. And the higher the fuel temperature, the faster it's going to ignite. So that's something to remember. Terrain, steep slopes that are greater than 50%. This provides for a rapid rate of the spread of fire due to convection heat. And it's an increased potential also for rolling debris.
That's right. One of the rules, the major rules as we deal with wildland firefighting, is never be above that wildland fire unless you're up at the crest of the ridge. And here's why. Fire can be very fast. It's amazing. You can get into a little valley and you get some wind and that thing just, it's gone. And you think you're a fast runner? Trust me, many times you can't outrun a forest fire. So if you're trying to be upwind of it or uphill of it, you want to get out of there. If it's coming that direction, figure out how to position yourself higher because it can outrun you very fast. And as Walter was saying, as you have steepness, the heat of the fire is coming up. Therefore, it's heating up these fuels ahead of it. Therefore, it's going to ignite a lot faster.
That's right. And you know, wind is our last factor that we have.
Yeah.
And you know, that wind speed that we have, that's one big primary factor of how rapidly fire is going to spread.
If not the most.
That's right.
Tell us about wind. Wind can affect, let's say if wind can speed it up, or what happens if it changes?
Down.
Oh, okay, what if it changes directions, that wind? What's the problem?
It's going to push that fire back the opposite direction.
And what if we have firefighters over on that other area? Or let's say a homeowner that is watching the wind, watching the weather, watching fire behaviors, and they're cutting that line, and then the wind changes, and you're at another area, and then that starts burning towards them. What's the problem?
That's a dangerous situation because that fire is going to start coming your direction next.
Absolutely. And if you have the ability, have a safety person. Have a person out there who's watching, and many times we choose one of the brightest guys that has the most experience with wildland firefighting.
That's right.
Because our lives are dependent on, absolutely God is the most important, Walter, but that person, we have to be smart. And that person's watching over, seeing what's going on, watching the change in the wind, and he's there just to concentrate on our safety.
And then letting us know.
And letting us know, yes. So if you have a neighbor or some family members that can be out there and just be a safety officer. Even on house fires now, we are finding that we are being required to have a safety officer that is there on that house fire. And let's say I'm on that scene as the chief and I'm going wide open, and that safety officer says, guys, there's an unsafe situation. He can actually pull us out and overrank me on that safety issue. Walter, in order to prevent fatigue, cramping, and impaired judgment, how much nutrition do the U.S. Forestry Service recommend that their firefighters intake a day?
At least 5,000 to 6,000 calories.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
What kind of food? Are we looking at American fast food, or what are we looking at?
No, we need to intake low fat and high complex carbohydrates.
Yes, absolutely. What about water intake? Is water important?
Water is very important. You're out there sweating, you're working hard, and you could drink 3 gallons per day, or maybe even as much as 1 to 2 quarts every 1/2 hour.
Absolutely. The U.S. Forestry is very strict on us on how much water we're intaking, because if we fall short because of dehydration, then that means our crew is now taking care of us, or we have to bring in folks to take care of us, and we're not taking care of the fire. When cutting a fire line, you want to strategically look at where you're going to place that line. You usually don't want to cut a fire line just above on a hillside. Now this isn't very much slope here, but definitely don't want to cut a fire line just on the side of a hill above a fire. You want to come to the top of the ridge and cut that line if possible. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at this area being the fire coming this direction, and we're going to cut a line right down through here to protect this area here. You want to think far enough ahead so that the fire doesn't get there before you do. The other thing is you want to look at where you're going to place that. Am I going to place that line right down where that tree is standing up, that pine tree, or am I going to look at placing it somewhere that I can cut through this dense area, that I can cut an area wide enough that will do the job? Back in the late 80s, we started using a product I felt like we were cheating, and that was a leaf blower. And so what we're going to do is we're going to show you right now how to use a leaf blower to initially clear the area. Then what we're going to do is come through and use some fire tools to clear that area up and show you how to do that. Walter? You may want to know, Walt, how wide do we place our fire line? That depends on what you're doing. But usually we're going to put about a 6-foot line. Now if you were out in the west and you had one of those big old fires with 300-foot flames, 400-foot flames, you're not going to contain that with a 6-foot line. But on your typical brush fire coming in, that's coming in your direction, you can put a 6-foot line and do pretty well. What Walter's going to do is he's going to come through here with a Pulaski, and he's going to clean this area out with the Pulaski. If we kept on going between this tree and there, we're actually going to take a chainsaw if you have that available. If you don't, then you want to look at a different area. But if you have a chainsaw, you want to cut through there, cut that tree down, that little tree there down, cut where the wood is going across, that dead tree is going across, because if you don't, the fire's going to be on that left side. It's going to go across that tree and start this other side on fire. So you want to make sure there's nothing hanging over. You want to make sure that there's nothing in your way. So just think of yourself as a bulldozer that's going to go down through here, cutting a line, and you've just got to have the tools for that. Or you've got to choose an area that your tools will work. So Walter's going to show us how to use a Pulaski, and I'm going to come behind him with a fire rake, which is the most common fire tool that we've used for many, many years. And the Pulaski is great. It's got a axe into it, so if Walter wanted to cut that, that tree, or it's got like a mattock in that you can grub and move some roots a whole lot more effectively than my fire rake can. The fire rake, to y'all farmers, may look very common, very familiar, and that is, these are the teeth on a sickle bar. And what they've done is cut that sickle bar teeth and put it on here, and that's what we use as a fire rake. Go ahead, Walter. You want to set yourself enough room ahead. I don't want to walk in there and take the possibility of getting hurt. So Walter's going to come on through there and advance ahead of me, and we want to give us, you know, maybe 10 feet advancement there between Walter and I, because we don't want him to injure myself or me to injure him. Normally when Walter and I are out working something with the Forest Service, we've got, you know, several guys with us. So the first guy going through, if you have quite a few fellas, let's say you've got some neighbors working on this, then you just barely hit and lick, and clear it. The next guy comes through, hits and lick, and goes through, And that way one guy isn't just doing all the work and the other guys come through and say, boy, that works really well, pretty cleaned out. And so you just hit a little. But if it's just you and someone else in your family, you're going to need to do a little more work like Walter's doing right now. Now notice I've caught up with Walter, so I want to cut back a little bit, give him some time to continue on and give me a rest. Another thing that we do is we may trade out with a person, and we'll go and we'll say, we'll just communicate to that person, Walter's getting pretty tired on that Pulaski, and he'll come back here and he'll cover the rake. I'll go up and I'll use the Pulaski. That's probably pretty good, Walter. Let me go ahead and finish through here. If you don't have the luxury of having a leaf blower, the way we used to have to do it, and the way we do it many times out in the field, if we don't have enough leaf blowers for all the lines that we're cutting, we'll send the guys out using just tools cutting that area. And so what Walter and I would like to do is show you cutting down through here, and I'm going to show you another tool that folks use, and it's called a McLeod. And what you've got is a big old hoe on this end, and we've got a rake on this end. It's a little more cumbersome to use. A lot of folks prefer to use the fire rake, but I like to demonstrate using the McLeod. I'm going to go first this time, kind of clear the area. Walter's going to come in through at the end with a fire rake, which I like ending with a fire rake, because you're able to get a good cleaning with that fire rake where the other tools don't do as well. What we're trying to do is we're trying to clean off this dirt that is actually like a topsoil, which is more fibrous and it can burn. So we're trying to clean off that top area, getting down to more dirt that is less prone to catch on fire. Because we have this up here, I'm going to pull this back a little bit. I don't want all this fuel up here. Something you also want to watch for is what we call widowmakers. You want to make sure there's not a tree as we get into the fire area that's already burnt, or into an area that has trees that are more rotten. Those trees can actually fall on you and kill you. If you have some tape, like surveying tape, what you can do is wrap that around a tree that's prone to fall. If you've got a chainsaw, cut that tree down. But if you don't worry about it. But you want to stay clear of any tree that's caught on fire, it's burned real bad. Stay away from those guys because they can be very deadly. Another thing you want to watch is where we have roots. Let's say we've got a stump here that's on that side, and let's say it's in an area that's been burning, it can actually go in here, go down in the ground, and keep on burning down underneath here. So you want to be careful as you do an overhaul to make sure these hot spots are out as much as possible. These guys can burn for weeks or months. And especially down in Florida or South Georgia in the muck areas, they'll burn for a long, long time. As you can see with how long it takes, we'd probably go a little faster, Walter and I would if we were cutting a line, but we want to demonstrate to y'all and show you what we're doing here. But you want to be well ahead of that fire so that that fire doesn't catch up with you before you can get that line cut. So pick your area well ahead of it so you can get on down through, get way on down there before your fire can come up in contact with that line. If you have the staffing or the folks there, neighbors or whatever, as the fire comes on up and it's not too aggressive a fire, they can be out here and watch and make sure it hasn't jumped that fire line. Because if it comes across that fire line, you've got to go back down and cut another line. One of the problems that we see is when we're on the side of a steep hill. Now this wouldn't be considered a steep hill, but if you're in the mountains and you have a steep hill, you may have rolling debris that comes down and will spread fire. So what we'll do is we'll put a line in through there, or several lines on there as rocks come down and logs or whatever to stop debris coming. We may even put some rocks right here to build this up even more. But here's an example Walter's cut that you'll set this little kind of inverted speed hump that's going to stop these guys as the rock comes down, as it's carrying stuff, it's going to stop here and fall back into here. It's surprising how much that can spread the fire. A major weakness that we see in the fire service is mop up or overhaul. Folks are tired. They're ready to go home. It's cold, it's hot. They've been working for hours fighting that fire, whether it's a house fire or a wildland fire. They are just what we'd say in the South, plumb tired, and they're ready to go home. But here's a problem. If you don't do a good overhaul or mop up, there's a chance that that fire can rekindle and take off again, and now you've got to go back out there and fight that fire. When you have it controlled, it's a whole lot easier to keep it controlled, spend the time, do the mop up, make sure everything's out, than it is to let it rekindle, get out there and take off again, because you're again going to have to do a mop up, and you also have to fight that fire, and you're tired. And so it's better to do it there. Walter, tell us about mop up. What's some things that we can do for mop up using our senses?
All right. First of all, we need to do a systematic mop up. This is very important. So we need to start with the hottest area and work toward the coolest.
Okay.
Another thing is plan a beginning and an ending point, and we need to keep to that plan and to do it. Another thing is to work inward from the control line. So work from the outside of the fire toward the inside and examine the entire area. We don't want to miss one spot, because we miss a spot, it starts back up.
Walter, what's a way that if we had enough family members, that we had enough neighbors or folks, and let's say we wanted to walk through that area, how can we kind of stagger and walk through that area? Tell us about that.
We could use what we call a grid method. And in a grid method, you may have a person standing over here, and then 10 feet or 15 feet away you have another person, and then the same thing another 10 or 15 feet away. But then in front of them, in the middle, another 10 or 15 feet in front of them, there's another person. So using this grid method, you can thoroughly cover an area completely and really quickly, to cover a large area.
Now, what if one of those folks finds a problem with a hot spot? What do the other guys do? Do they keep on going?
No, they need to stop, wait where they are, let that person take care of that hot spot. If they need help, say, hey, I need somebody to come over here help me. Everyone else waits, that person goes, helps them, gets back into their spot, and then they continue the grid.
It's kind of like search and rescue. When we go out and we're searching for someone who's lost in the woods, we'll do a grid technique, and we'll spread out and we'll walk on through that area and systematically cover that area, turn around, come back the other way, just like you would plow in a field, turn around, come back and plow, but it's a little more wide. But this way we can make sure as we're walking, we're looking, is there any problems like Walter's talking about?
That's right. And we need to use our 4 senses as well. What do we need to look for? Smoke, say, heat waves.
Where there's
as
smoke,
you watch
there's
fire.
absolutely.
White ash, stump holes, or maybe even steam, as you see that rising above the ground. Touch.
Now, what if we see some steam? Does that mean we've got to cut every bit of steam? Let's say we're in the burnout area. Do we stop until every bit of steam's gone? Or can we, if it's minor, can we continue on and come back and mark that area with a ribbon and make sure that area's out?
We can definitely continue on and then come back and check that area and see, hey, is this area still okay? But we need to mark it, that way we know where it's at, so that we don't have to come back and search the whole area over again to check that one spot.
And how do we mark it?
The best way to do it is from your fire line is to take a piece of ribbon, a piece of
Surveying
tape, and put it every so often, hang it off of something, and put it over to where that is. And work from your fire line. When you're running and doing a search, start with the right guy. He's the lead guy. He's over on the edge of the fire line. Our fire line's right here. He's here. All the other guys are spread out this way. You're walking this way. So from that fire line, all you have to do now is go into the fire line. You see a ribbon here. Walk in with that ribbon and follow them, and you'll find where your spot's at.
Good point. So we may want to take a clipboard like this, draw the fire.
And then mark possibly where our ribbons are at.
Yeah, and we'll say about right in this area, put an X, and it's so many paces into that area. And you might want to mark a tree that's on that fire line, and mark a tree there, and then know that directly at a 90-degree angle in 30 feet, 50 feet, we've got a hot spot. Mark that area. So as you come through and you walk that fire line and you've got your map, you can go back and recheck that area instead of just trying to, well, let's see, where did I put that thing? Where is it?
That's right. That's right. Another one we use besides touch is smell. And, we can smell for smoke or burning materials as well. Also, we need to listen. So what do we need to listen for? Crackling and popping that you might hear that's happening, or maybe the hiss of water as it hits hot material.
The United States Forestry Service has set up a group of firefighting orders, which is set up to establish a standard as we go out and fight forest fires in order to keep us safer. I also encourage y'all to take a look at these and look at how you as a family can implement those, or you as neighbors can implement these in order as y'all go out and fight a brush fire, forest fire that's coming near your home to keep y'all safe. Walter, help us out. Tell us these 10 orders.
All right, the first one is to keep informed on fire weather conditions and forecasts. Number 2 is to know what your fire is doing at all times. Then we want to base all actions on current and expected behavior of the fire, identify escape routes and safety zones, and make them known. We want to post lookouts when there is possible danger. Be alert, keep calm, think clearly, and act decisively. Number 7, maintain prompt communications with your forces, your supervisor, and adjoining forces. Number 8, give clear instructions and ensure that they are understood. Then we want to maintain control of your forces at all times. And then, last but not least, fight fire aggressively, having provided for safety first.
Walter just mentioned an issue which is very important when out there fighting fires, and that is safety zones. As you're working and developing fire lines, as you're out there fighting that fire, always look and see if there's an area that you can escape to. So as you're going, is there an area that's more clear in case that fire starts growing out of control in your area? Is there a safe area that's been cleaned off? Is there an area of a bunch of rocks, a river, or whatever you can go to that's going to be safe? So as you go across that perimeter around that fire, always as you move to a new area, look around, see if there's a safety zone. If there's not a safety zone, build a safety zone. Go out there, clean off an area that you can go to that will provide you protection. Another area that we look at is called watchouts. There are 18 items that make a forest fire more dangerous. It's kind of like the top 18 items that can kill a firefighter. I'd also like to share that with y'all, and as Walter goes over those, as a family, as neighbors, as you look at addressing wildland fires, look at these items, take them into account to keep your family safe. Walter, help us out.
All right, our first watch out situation is fire that has not been scouted and sized up. Number 2 is in country not seen in daylight. Also, safety zones and escape routes that aren't identified. Number 4, unfamiliar with weather and local factors influencing fire behavior. Uninformed on strategy, tactics, and hazards. Instructions and assignments are not clear. Number 7, no communication link with crew members and supervisors. Constructing line without safe anchor point, and building a fire line downhill with the fire below. Number 10 is tempting frontal assault on fire. Number 11, unburned fuel between you and the fire. You can't see the main fire, not in contact with anyone who can. And on a hillside where rolling material can ignite the fuel below. Number 14, weather is getting hotter and drier. Number 15, the wind increases and or changes direction. Number 16, getting frequent spot fires across the line. Number 17, terrain and fuels make escape and safety zones difficult. And number 18, taking a nap near the fire line.
Can you believe it? Folks falling asleep on the fire line? Well, it really happens. People, let's say Walter's on a crew, they've been out for days, he's just totally tired, and the group takes a break. And so Walter goes over here, lays down, takes a nap, and the fire boss says, okay guys, let's get going. They jump up and they take off making the line again. They forgot Walter's over there taking a nap. And in the meantime, the fire comes up and it catches Walter on fire, or could actually kill him. And so it actually really happens. We want to look now at common denominators on fire behavior on fire tragedies. Walter, help us out with 4 major items that are common denominators that can cause folks to die.
All right. Such fires as these often occur on relatively small or deceptively quiet areas of large fires. In relatively light fuels such as grass, herbs, and light brush, when there is an unexpected shift in wind direction or in wind speed, and when fire responds to topographic conditions and runs uphill.
We've already talked a little bit about safety zones, but Walter, I'd like you to go a little more in depth about safety zones and what is the criteria you do to set up a safety zone in order to keep the family or the firefighters safe in the event of a fire.
Okay. Well, first of all, we want to avoid locations that are downwind from the fire. We also want to avoid locations that are in chimneys, saddles, or narrow canyons. We also want to avoid locations that require a steep uphill escape route. We want to take advantage of heat barriers such as lee sides of ridges, large rocks, or solid structures. We want to burn out safety zones prior to flame front approach.
Walter just mentioned the problem in safety with being uphill of the fire. You can have some top-notch hot shots, and those are the guys, those are the elite firefighters, just like the smoke jumpers. And those guys are really in shape. Those guys have a tough time outrunning a fire. And so the folks out there that aren't as in shape, they're really going to have a tough time outrunning that fire. So be sure, if you are on a hill, you've got fire below you coming up that hill, get out of there. You may find it's faster to cut across the side laterally instead of trying to get up that hill, because that fire, as it comes in those chimneys, those valleys, as Walter was talking about, and it hits the wind, it's amazing. It can be just like a blowtorch going up that chimney or that little valley going up the side of the mountain, and it will overcome you. Anything else? Have we about covered?
I think we have.
All right. And again, you want to make sure, watch for trees. As you're doing that grid, as you're out there walking, as you're doing your mop-up, you're also keeping track of what's going on with trees. Because if you have a tree that's severely burned, or an old dead tree that had some challenges there because of the fire, be careful. If you got a chainsaw, cut that thing down. But be sure and monitor those trees. Fire ice is a product that's being used by the United States Forestry Service, being used by paid departments and volunteer departments throughout the United States for quite a few years. And what we'd like to demonstrate, Walter, is how this product works and how we can put this on our house. We can put it out in the fuel areas which are outside of our house, in the yard, on the trees, and as that forest fire, that brush fire comes that way, we're not going to see that area catch on fire. You can have one of the portable pumps that we talked about, which is going to supply 1.5 inches, 2.5 inches. You can then spray your house. You can put that into, say, a cistern or into a jacuzzi. You can fill it up, and that then will supply pumping your house. But let's try this out, Walter, see what you think.
Let's do it.
What we're going to do is we've got just plain water, and then we have the fire ice. Fire ice is made of like a baby powder product. Go ahead and start stirring it, Walter.
All right.
This bottle right here will serve 3.5 gallons. So you can use it in a metal water extinguisher. You can put it in a sprayer, and you put it to that ratio, one of these bottles to 3.5 gallons of water. So we have still left in this bottle here. Walter's, why don't you show us here, Walter, what's it looking like? Fire departments can put this in their fire trucks, and they can leave it there up to 10 years according to the manufacturer. They don't have to worry about it going bad. The nice thing about fire ice is that it's the only product on the market that does not have to have other devices to make it work, such as eductors, specialized nozzles. All you do is pour it into your tank and use your regular nozzle that you're using. Whether it's a fog nozzle or your straight bore nozzle, it's still going to work. So you don't have to invest in a lot of other nozzles. Well, let's try it out. I'll tell you what, let's take this one here. Let's set this guy on fire. Just point out here so he can see. Walter, would you say this is hot?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's see if we can put it out. Okay, let's see if we can restart that. Kind of clean it off there. Let's see if we can restart that. Turn it out so we can see it there. It's not restarting. Let's try it up. Let's try it up a little higher. It's not starting here. Let's see if we can put that out again, Walter. Okay. You want to try the ultimate test?
Let's try it.
This is pretty cool. Okay. Walter's going to stick his hand down in here. He's going to come up with it in his hand. And let's see what happens. Walter, can you feel it?
I can't feel a thing.
Cannot feel a thing. We're talking hot, guys. Very hot. And he cannot feel a thing. Firefighters, they are now coming out with a new product where if a firefighter catches on fire, it's like a safety system on your fire truck. We can douse that fire department with this product or a person who's burning, and it worked. But check this out. It's biodegradable. What do you think?
Pretty amazing stuff.
Pretty neat. So you can look at fire ice. It's going to go a long ways. It's going to put that fire out, that there is a fire, and also if you have a fire that's coming towards your house, you can put this product on your house, on the grounds, on the trees, and that fire is not going to penetrate through that area.
the city life was not conducive to a spiritual life. It wasn't, we did not want to be the norm. We wanted something different. And so we felt the leading 12 and a half years ago to move out of the city to a country life. I've heard a lot of people that have talked about interviewing successful people toward the end of their life. They always had regrets of not spending more time with their family and more time with God. They never said, I wish I would have worked more. I wish I'd had more money. It was always the opposite. But they can't go back and change that. When we moved out into the country, we made two moves, two steps. The first one was moving from the city to the country, and we learned a lot of things there. But then we felt the Lord leading us further into even a different type of country living. And the Plain people had a draw to us because of their families and how they worked together. And the father was at home with the children and things such as that. And so we saw that lifestyle, and we craved that. And so the Lord allowed us to move to a clean community. Because we saw the results of other families, where our world was going. And we wanted out. We lived amongst them for 2.5 years. We still live very close to them, but we lived amongst them, rented a house from them for 2.5 years. And I can say it was a blessing to have the chance to gain knowledge that most everybody else doesn't have. And we want to impart what we can to other people, God's people, in these times that we are about to come upon.
I had never even seen a wood cook stove in person. I had seen pictures, but it never crossed my mind to learn how to cook on one. I had no idea. The closest I came to a wood stove of any kind was my father during the energy crisis had gotten a little potbelly parlor stove, had it in our basement, and that was the only thing I knew about wood burning or splitting, but it was not anything we could cook on. It was a decorative stove, so we couldn't even put a pan of water on it. So I had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever about wood, cooking, heating, any of that. When we were getting ready to move, Daniel contacted some of the men in the community and said, what do I buy? Where do I get it? What do I get? We didn't have a clue. And they advised him it was to the best of their knowledge as to what we should get. And we ordered it. It was not waiting for us when we got there. We were 2 months without a stove, and that was a whole other story. But when it came, we learned hands-on. Even though the community was so helpful, there wasn't a lady standing next to me saying, do it this way, don't do that, or teaching Daniel or I about how to do a fire. Fortunately, we had gained that experience through our first move of how to start a fire and heat our home with wood. We had that knowledge, but how to apply it to cooking food was a whole new thing. And so we learned by trial and error. That it's not something that you can just explain to somebody how to do. It's just something you have to experience. And we survived. I didn't starve my family. We did it. And it was fun learning. It's an attitude. You can either make it drudgery and be scared to death and be so intimidated you never try, or you can say, this could be really interesting. And ladies, for years and years before me, have cooked on a wood cook stove, and if they can do it, I can do it. And I have a better wood cook stove than they ever had, so let's go. And we just got in, rolled up our sleeves, and did it. And the first meal off that wood cook stove, I felt pretty good. You know, my mama didn't know how to do that, and my grandmother probably did, but it was really satisfying to make that first meal for my family. It was all stovetop, though. I didn't venture into baking yet, but it was really rewarding. Bread is probably the thing that everybody wants to bake in their wood cook stove and can't wait to taste and can't wait to try. And eventually, I did do bread. I had some flops. We burnt some bread, you know, but we learned. We learned. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. There wasn't as many oopses as I thought there would be, because we were just going a little to a time and trying to look at it with a really good attitude of, this is exciting, this is really great. We don't need propane, we don't need electricity, and we're eating and we're being warmed, you know. And so that was exciting to us, the freedom that that stove gave us. And the meal was on the table without ever going near a fossil fuel, but just by putting some wood in it, you know. So it was really exciting.
One of the things I remember this Amish man saying to me, he says, my wife can get up in the morning. He says, I fire the stove up, and he said, in 15 minutes, my wife can cook me biscuits on it, or in it. And I said, 15 minutes? I said, the one we have now takes at least an hour to get prepared to bake something in it or even cook on the top. I said, that sounds like the stove that I want. And so we prayed, Lord, if you want us to have one of those stoves, we need to sell the one that we have, because they're expensive. They're an investment in our home, in our lives, because they are the hub of your home. You know, you can cook your food, you can bake your food, you can heat your water, you can dry vegetables, herbs, dry your clothes above them. Very efficient to basically be the hub of your home. That's where the plain people, they build their houses around their stoves. And my wife will mention later that when the young people get married, that's the thing that the parents give them, is a wood cook stove.
That's their wedding gift.
That's
to
their
their children.
wedding gift.
That's their wedding gift.
And
because it's
for
so
most of them,
important.
yeah.
How about the interaction of the family with the stove?
Oh.
We're always around the stove. The children, the first thing they do when they come down in the morning, they're right in front of that firebox. You know, you barely get a good morning out of them, and they're snuggled right up to it. And
Is it because the house is cold?
no, there's just something, when you get out of a nice, cozy, warm bed, you come up to the nice, cozy, warm stove. I don't know, it just makes transition into the day that much easier. There's just something that draws you to that stove when there's a fire in it.
Right, especially when they can come down and see the fire and they can sit in front of it.
Through this door.
Yes,
Right,
through that
right.
glass door, yes.
There's just something magnetic about this wood cook stove that just brings the family together around it. And when we're ill, if we do any fomentation or any treatments, it's in front of the wood cook stove. And we gave our babies their first bath, they were home birth, in front of the wood cook stove. And there's just a lot of memories and family time. You know, we dry apples, we all cut up the apples and put it up on the wood cook stove. And when the snow flies and the mittens come in dripping wet and the pant legs are dripping wet and the socks are wet and cold, the rack goes up in front of the wood cook stove and we dry our clothes. And so it just seems like everything revolves around this inanimate object that suddenly takes on its own personality for the family. You know, when we left the Plain community, the wood cook stove came with us. It moved with us, so it was part of us.
We miss it when it's not on.
Yeah, you do.
Now we'd like to take a look at the anatomy of the wood cook stove, and we're going to start out with the firebox. This particular stove has a glass door which has high temperature ceramic glass in it that can withstand plenty of heat. You open the door up. You have handles on the door as well as other areas of the stove that have stainless steel coils on them to keep so that you can touch things without it being hot or burning you. Go inside this firebox, and this particular stove, as well as a few of the other ones, have a standard fire brick that you can find at any hardware store, less than $5 a piece to replace. And some of the stoves also come with a special cast fire brick that will cost you over $100 to replace that if you ever break it or it gets cracks in it. So that's one thing to consider when you have a wood cook stove and when you're looking around for one. Also wanted to mention with the door that there's a gasket around the glass as well as around the fire door itself, the firebox door. And that is because this is a airtight wood cook stove. All your modern wood cook stoves, especially the Amish made, they're all airtight, which is a very good thing to look for when you're looking for a wood cook stove. The older stoves, wood cook stoves that are out there, like Grandma had, as well as having a small firebox that was inefficient because you had to keep on just feeding more and more wood to it all the time, and it's only a small piece of wood that you can get in the firebox. They were not good for heating your house because the fire would not stay going very long because the firebox was small, as well as it was not airtight. It did not have a gasket around it to keep the air from seeping in around the door, causing it to burn your firewood too fast. So when you're looking for a wood cook stove, new or used, make sure that it is an airtight model that can efficiently use up the wood that you have. This particular firebox, when it comes to the type of firebox design it is what is called a exclusive air jet design. It has holes in 5 sides of the firebox, the 4 sides plus one in the center, where it helps it to have a more efficient burn of the wood itself, which cuts down on any creosote problems. We go next to the fire grate. That's where you would put your wood when you make a fire. You put your wood on top of the grate, and that's where the ashes will fall down to, and it will go down through the grate into your ash pans. Before we go any further, I'd like to discuss water coils and water jackets. This unit right here is what's called a double water coil. It's made out of stainless steel tubing. In this particular model, it will install above the firebox. Inside, it'll be just sitting just like that. There are holes pre-drilled in the back of the stove so that this can slide through. If you ordered one with this, it would already be pre-installed, but you can order them afterwards and put them in yourself. And there will be holes in the back of the stove where you can install this. It just bolts in. And the water circulates through it. With heat convection, it will heat your water. When coming out the back, you can have it hooked to a water holding tank, which can circulate in that holding tank with heat convection. And you can use that for your whole house system to heat your water. Just like a regular water heater, you would have your cold water coming in and your hot water going out. And this would be what would circulate your hot water. And it's in a very efficient way to heat your whole house system. There's also what's called a water jacket. It is basically a small, very small water reservoir that goes inside some of the cook stoves that works on the same principle as a water coil. It's just called a water jacket, and is more of a bigger piece of steel that the water circulates through the inside of it. Now we'll go next to the draft controls. This particular stove has what's called a slider control. Not all the stoves have that. Some of them have different types of controls. But this has a slider control at the top that once you get your fire going, you can adjust the flame, how much it burns, with just this slider control. To the right of that, on this particular stove, is the oven control, which controls you turning the oven on and off It has a flap that'll come up to the exhaust vent and shuts that off to where the heat goes over the top of the wood of the stove top and circles the oven down around it and out. Now we'll go next to the ash pan doors and the bell drafts that are on the ash pan doors on this stove. Some of them have ash pans, wide ash pan door that has a large ash pan. This stove has 2 ash pans and 2 ash pan doors. You open the ash pan door. This also is gasketed to keep it airtight so that no air can get in through there and again cause your wood to burn inefficiently and burn up too fast. This particular draft is called a bell draft. On this stove, that has bell drafts on the bottom as well as a slider draft at the top. But this is what you would use to, once you've got your fire lit, you would use these to get your fire going quickly. And you can see how easily they turn. And once you get the fire going quickly, you would just shut them down. Just like that. And it also, the bell drafts enable you to really shut the stove down tightly at night because they get very tight. Another one of some of the other stove manufacturers call them spin drafts, not bell drafts, but spin drafts. So there's different types that the different manufacturers would use. Some of the manufacturers also have a draft control in their solid door. It doesn't have glass, but it has a solid door, and they control their draft by that draft control in the door. One thing I also would like to mention is the size. Not just that these are airtight, but the size of the fireboxes. It's a very important point. The modern wood cook stoves will take up to, starting from an 18-inch log up to 22.5 inches. And so you can put 18.5-inch logs up to a 22.5-inch log that you can cram this full before you go to bed at night. I usually shut my stove down about 8 o'clock and open it between 5 and 6 the next morning. There's still coals in there. You just open up your bell drafts, put in a little bit of fresh wood, and within about 15-20 minutes, you're ready to bake or to cook. Now we're going to look at the types of stove tops and the designs. This particular stove has as you can see, a 3-section design, and they developed that to cut down on the expansion and contraction and warpage. And so that's why they've got 3 different areas of stovetop. This particular stove, you can get either a steel top, which this is, or a cast iron top. Also, some of the stove manufacturers, getting back to the firebox itself, you can change the firebox from the traditional left-hand side to a right-hand side, depending on how your house is set up, if you want to be able to see the fire from the right-hand side of the stove or the left-hand side. So we do have options in that way too. Some of the stove tops have a solid steel top. Some of them are solid completely across with no eyes. Some of them come with what's called either an eye or a lid. They're termed either one of those terms could be used. And so some of them are only top load as well. I want to mention that. Some of them, like this stove, is a side load firebox. Some of them have a front load firebox. Some of them have a top load firebox. It's only has a solid top over here, but over on this side you would have an eye that you would have to take the lid off and put the wood in down through the hole, light your fire, and then put the lid back on. There's advantages to all of them, and so it's just up to personal preference of what somebody would like. On this particular stove here, you can see that the stove pipe, which is stainless steel, comes up through the stove top. It's called a front flue, This stove, you can also get the flue in the back as well. Most of your other stoves, your flue will come out the back, but when you have a front flue coming up through your stove top, you can get your stove closer to the wall. And I would say probably an additional 8 to 10 inches closer to the wall than if you have it come out the back. I also wanted to mention about the damper. That will help you to shut your stove down almost completely. Next, we will go to the backsplash, which is, as you can see, it's porcelain lined, very easily cleaned if you were to splatter anything on it or anything such as that. And on top of that would be either a shelf or a warming closet. The shelf would be just a single shelf unit across the top. In the warming closet, you can put things inside of. My wife calls it her Amish microwave because you can put things in it that can be defrosted, you can keep things warm, you can warm things up, you can put your canning jars in it to dry, you can put things on top of it also to keep warm. And so the warming closet itself has a lot of advantages over a shelf, but you can get either one. They're options. As we're up in this area, I wanted to mention the thermometer that I have up here on my stovepipe. You can see that's hooked, connected to the front flue, to the stovepipe coming up. I have it right here, and it will tell you what the temperature is of the stovepipe itself. That'll let you know if you are having any creosote buildup problems, because it'll let you know what the temperature of the stovepipe itself is. You can also use this particular thermometer on your stove top, which is very helpful when you're new at using a wood cook stove to know whether or not you're getting your stove top too hot. And so if you're not sure what your temperature is and how you can control it, and if it's getting too hot, it's a good way to learn how to use your wood cook stove and how to adjust your flame and things such as that. Next, we would like to go to the oven. This is the oven door. There's a thermometer on the oven door. We like to also use a thermometer on the inside of the oven as well. Seems to be a little bit more precise, having one on the inside. It's very important to have the right temperature when you're baking, so that thermometer would be available at any hardware store or department store. As we're looking at the whole oven itself, it's porcelain lined, which is very easy for cleaning, like your conventional oven. And the size. Grandma's oven, as you know, they were small, but this oven is very large, and it can bake up to 8 loaves of bread. I want to pull this rack out and show you the size of that oven. You can tell from the size of the rack what size the oven is and how deep it is. If you'll remember, when we were over talking about the firebox, I showed you the oven control. I wanted to go back to that since we're talking about the oven right now and remind you that this is where the firebox is on this particular stove. When you close that oven control, you take the heat that normally just goes up into the top of the stove top and out the flue. You would take it on the outside of the oven. It would go circle around the oven. First would go on the top of the oven, on the outside of the oven, down the side of the oven, and then underneath the oven, and then back up and out of the flue. And that's where you need something and you want to make sure that you have it warm enough where you have the bottom of whatever you're baking, you want it to be done, well done, you would use that control. There are times where you will not have to use that control. You can just leave it open to where it'll still keep your oven warm, but it won't be forcing the heat underneath to where you would have it very hot on the bottom. There are just different options of what you can do with that oven control. There's another option to this stove, as well as some of the other ones, that it has a piece right here that you can leave this out, partially close the oven door so that you can take that heat that would normally be trapped in your oven and release that into your room to increase the heating of your home.
wanted to talk with you briefly about the different types of wood that we have, that we use here in the South. We use some pine. We try not to use a whole lot of pine because it has a lot of sap in it and can cause creosote. But the pine is a good wood to use to start your fire and to get a good hot fire quickly. Then we have poplar, which is right here. That's also it's a medium wood. It's not a hardwood and it's not a softwood. And so that's a good wood to, if you need a fire to last long, but you want it to be hot as well. Maple is also that same type of wood, but it's more of a hardwood. It will last longer in your wood cook stove. And then, of course, we have oak. That's my preference here in the South of using wood. It'll give you a good, nice, steady fire for a long time. That's what I use at nighttime when I shut my stove down. I can shut my stove down at 8 o'clock at night, and between 5 and 6 o'clock the next morning, I can fire it up because there's still coals left in the bottom of it. You may be wondering what these different blocks of wood are back here. We have a local sawmill that makes railroad ties. And so I can call them up and have them with a 1-ton truck. They will bring it over here, bring it to my driveway and dump it for me. And all I have to do is stack it. My family and I, we get out here and work together, and makes for a nice family activity, togetherness. And so that's what these are for, and that's what's available right now, so that's what we use. We don't have a lot of extra wood on our property and things like that, so this is what we use right now. And so the best rule of thumb is to, no matter where you're at throughout the nation, look for and try to find the hardest wood that you can find. Even amongst evergreens, there is harder woods than others. Try to find the hardest wood that you can find and the driest wood. That's especially true with pine. Make sure that it is dry, because if it's not, it'll cause a lot of creosote problems because there's so much sap in it. And it holds a lot of moisture here in the South as well. So try to dry it out as much as you can. A year's time split and stacked is a good rule of thumb for you to dry out the wood that you have. But that's what we have here in the South. But like I said, out in other parts of the country, there's evergreens that they don't have as high a BTUs as the oak wood does. But that's what the hardwoods will give you, is a higher BTU, which will give you a longer and hotter, more steady burn. And that's why we use that in our stove for overnight. Well, it's time to light a fire. And you can do this in various ways. I'm going to use a little bit of newspaper because it's readily available and it's a quick, easy way to get a fire going. But if you don't have that, you can use twigs. You can use pine cones if those are available. And just many different ways to light a fire. Well, we're ready to light the match now. This is going to be a cold flue, so it's a good idea to always have your oven control open so that the exhaust gases can go directly to the flue. One match ought to do it. I've got the slider control already open, and I will shut the door and open up the bell drafts. It shouldn't be long before we got a good fire going. Now that the fire is going real good, close the bell drafts down. If you'll have watched real close, you will have noticed that the fire decreased a little bit when I closed the bell drafts. I'm going to put some bigger wood on now. If you want, you can go back and open them up again to get it going a little bit faster for you.
Let's talk about cooking on the top of your wood cook stove. This is probably the easiest thing that you can learn immediately when you get your stove. A lot of women are concerned about cooking in the oven or cooking on the cooktop, but the cooktop is the easiest of the two. And I would advise you to not worry about baking right away when you get your cook stove, but to focus on the cooktop itself. It's very forgiving and it's much easier. For our purposes here, we've got a couple of things cooking right now. We've got some potatoes frying and I've got some soup. And I just wanted you to be able to listen and to see this, that it's very, very similar as if you were cooking on your conventional stoves. The sounds, the temperatures. A lot of ladies ask me, well, how do I regulate the heat when you're cooking? The heat of the cooktop is dictated by the fire that you have in your firebox. If you have an extremely hot fire, common sense tells you, you're going to have an extremely hot cooktop. That's where experience does come in. But you'll learn over time how much of a fire you need to cook, and especially what you're cooking will vary on how much fire you need as well. For instance, my soup at this point doesn't want as hot a fire as my potatoes. So I've got this over on this side. And this is the easiest thing that I can tell you to remember. Over your firebox is high heat. In the middle of your cooktop would be medium high. And the furthest away from your firebox would be the lowest heat. Now, there is one item that I would highly recommend you look into purchasing when you get your your wood cook stove, and that's a trivet. These are cast iron. You can purchase them at Lehman's, for example, or other companies that you might find on the internet that handle wood cook stove items. This will give you a little more, or it will reduce the heat, I should say, on something that you are trying to not boil, that you would like to simmer. For instance, now that I've put my soup back on the stove cooktop, it is boiling away, and I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to set it back on this trivet, and now I am in simmer mode. So all this is a little bit experimental with each stove, but over time you're going to find that it will become second nature to you, and it's really not hard at all. If you happen to put too hot a fire in, you have the luxury of removing the food off the cooktop till your stove quiets down and then putting it back on. There's a lot of room for error and learning when you get your stove. Now you will notice the different pans that we're using. I haven't purchased anything specific for this stove. We've got these at a regular department store. This is a non-stick skillet and stainless steel skillet, and this is a stainless steel pot. But what I would advise, and that is that you get the pots that have the tri-ply bottom. Some even have up to 5-ply. That gives you a little more insulation between your food and the cooktop, especially when you're learning. If you tend to have too hot of a fire, you'll have less scorching and burning of your food. So These pots, and a lot of you may already have those in your kitchen, will do just fine on your wood cook stove. What you do want to stay away from, though, is plastic. Unlike your conventional propane or electric ovens or, your range tops, plastic is not wood cook stove friendly. Everything on this wood cook stove is hot, and we would not feel safe to leave it anywhere, even up top near that stovepipe. And if it should fall, what a mess it would make on the top of your cooktop. So plastic is something that you should not be using with a wood cook stove. What we would encourage you to look into is stainless steel ware. You can't go wrong with this. But you'll notice close to me during this whole time are my oven mitts, because again, everything on your wood cook stove is going to get hot. So if you have the spoon up there, you aren't going to want to pick it up with your bare hands. Once again, I know it may seem a lot to remember at first, but it does come second nature to you when you're working around your stove. Over here, I have very well-seasoned bread pans. These are just regular old bread pans. There are cast iron bread pans, if you can still find them, that are absolutely wonderful. But I happen to have just regular bread pans I've been using for years, and they work fine in this oven. The final item I wanted to show you is a cast iron. Everyone associates cast iron, I think, with wood cook stoves, and yes, it'd be wonderful. We do have cast iron ware, but sometimes, to be honest, it's not convenient, it's heavy, it's cumbersome, and so I do like the option of just standard pans. But yes, cast iron does do wonderfully with your wood cook stove, so if you want to get those or have them, it does work great. Once you've been cooking on your cooktop and you feel like you're ready to try baking, one of the easiest ways to begin is to pick a food that would be easy to prepare, such as potatoes. Baking potatoes is one of the easiest things to do in your wood cook stove because it's hard to burn a potato. And if your oven isn't hot enough, then the potatoes will just take a little bit longer. They also don't need a lot of watching or a lot of turning or a lot of attention. If you have your oven to temperature, your baked potatoes should take about the same time in your wood cook stove oven as they would in a conventional oven, and that's about an hour to an hour and a half. And all I would probably do in the course of that hour and a half is to just peek at them once or twice and turn them like this, because the back side of my oven and the right side of my oven might be a little bit hotter than the other two sides. Back in they go. Most cook stove ovens can accommodate 4 to even 8 loaves of bread very comfortably. And in we go. You can see I have an oven thermometer to help me monitor the oven temperature so I can watch the bread. And we'll be back in about 10 minutes to check our bread, because we'll probably want to turn it, because most of the heat is going to be on the right side of the oven as well as the back side of the oven. And so to get a nice evenly baked loaf of bread, we're going to want to turn it. So I'm going to go set the oven timer, and we'll check it in 10 more minutes. Well, our 10 minutes is up, and it's time to check our bread, and it's also time to probably rotate the bread so that it cooks evenly. Because as I mentioned before, a wood cook stove oven tends to have some hotter sides and warmer sides. So I'm just going to rotate the bread. I'm going to put the bread on the right to the left, and I'm going to turn it around. As you can see, this side is starting to brown more than the other, and so we want it to bake evenly. And I'm going to do the same with this. I'm going to turn it around. We've got some beautifully big bread. Back in it goes, and then we'll time it for about another 10 minutes to 15 minutes, and we'll check it. May I mention at this time, when you rotate your bread or anything else you're baking, it's a good time to come around to the firebox side and to check the status of your fire. I have the advantage on my wood cook stove that it has a high temperature glass door where I can just peek in and see that my fire is doing just fine. There's plenty of wood, and it will maintain perfect heat to finish out the baking of my bread. But if you didn't have that glass in the door, as other stoves don't, you would want to open up your drafts and actually look inside and see how your fire is doing, and then adjust the drafts according to what your needs are for heat. It's so important with baking to maintain a steady, even fire, even more so than the cooktop, so that your pastries, your breads, your pies, whatever it is you're cooking, your cakes, cook evenly, and you don't have suddenly a very hot fire that will burn them before they're done, or you don't have a too low a fire where they're not getting cooked all the way through the middle. We'll come back in 10 minutes and check the status of our bread. All right, time's done, and let's check our bread and see how we did. Sure looks done. There we are. That is one big loaf of bread. And may I add, ladies, that don't be discouraged if when you first start baking in your wood cook stove oven that your bread isn't this large, or if it's a little dark brown on one side, maybe even burnt, or even if it's undercooked. It takes experience and time to learn. Let's take it out of the pan so it can cool. I always check the bottom. I think we've got a pretty good loaf of bread. It looks like it's completely cooked through, even as large of a loaf as these are. And this is one of the things that is probably the hardest job for a wood cook stove to accomplish. It can cook very well the top part of your bread or whatever it is you're baking. It's that bottom that needs to be really cooked thoroughly because, again, the heat is on the side and in the back. Where on a conventional oven, your heat comes from the bottom. There's no problem getting the bottom of bread to bake in a conventional oven, but in a wood cook stove oven, that's where the challenges are. The left side as well as the bottom. And it looks like we've got some nice bread. Here's one more example of what your wood cook stove can cook for your family. Beautiful pies. We've covered cooktop cooking, baking in the oven, and now I wanted to touch on canning. The cooking surface of a wood cook stove is tremendous compared to your conventional electric or your propane ranges. The whole top is hot and can be used for canning, which is extremely convenient when you're trying to do large amounts. This is a pressure canner, as many of you know. This stove, as well as all the other cook stoves, is capable, more than capable, of providing enough heat to get that pressure canner up to temperature and keep it there. Corn, for instance, takes an hour and a half to pressure can safely. No problem with your wood cook stove. I know that's hard to imagine, but we've done it and it does do the job very adequately. Just to give you an idea of the surface of this particular stove here, as well as many other of the Amish stoves, look at the amount of cook space we can do. We can pressure can and water bath can at the same time. We don't have to wait for the pressure canning to get done, so we have now the room to put our water bath canner on. We can do both at the same time because of the surface size of these stoves. I've put the pressure canner on this side because of why? This is the hottest side of the stove, and this needs the most heat. My water bath canner can be cooking over here on a lot of heat, but a lesser of amount, because this doesn't have to get up to the same temperature as this. So you can see just how much capability you have out of one load of wood for your canning. Our heat doesn't stop at the warming closet or your shelf. There's still more heat we can take advantage of. And as you can see here, my husband's built a drying rack where we can dry our fruit. The heat continues to rise all the way up to the ceiling before it goes out into the home, and so there's a lot of energy up here that we can tap into. We could not only dry fruit, but we dry mittens, scarves, whatever we need, dish towels. And with that said, though, may we caution you that anything that is drying above the stove needs to be extremely secure so that it doesn't fall onto the cooked surface and cause a fire. There are many different versions of a drying rack that you can use. This particular one is one of the simplest we saw and we liked, where you can just use these poles to skewer your fruit. But you could make one that has hardware cloth, and that would be much more secure for food or drying clothing or towels, where it just could set on that mesh and would be probably much safer than even what you see here. So once again, we've got different levels of heat, and all can be used for food preparation, preservation, or just in usefulness of drying things in the home, such as jars or clothing. I wanted you to see all that you can do with your wood cook stove. You can bake, you can can, you can do your everyday cooking. You can defrost, you can reheat, you can dry items such as canning jars. You can keep warm food that's already been prepared until it's ready to be eaten. And you can dry fruits and vegetables. When you look at all this, you can understand why the Amish present a cook stove to their children when they're about to get married. They understand the versatility and the independence that these stoves offer. So with just a crosscut saw, a splitting maul, and your wood cook stove, you can heat your home, heat your water, cook, and preserve your food all with just one fire.
In reference to installing your stove, I would like to make a few suggestions that you would check first off with your local laws and codes and the manufacturer's specifications. There's clearances that need to be abided by that the manufacturer would recommend, and also different types of flues and piping and things like that. There's a consideration of wall protection as well as heat shields and floor protection. So again, I would just recommend that you would check with your manufacturer and the local laws and codes. This particular stove has a 7-inch diameter flue stovepipe that comes out of the stove. And there are different types of piping that you can purchase. You can have a stainless steel pipe, which is supplied with this particular stove that comes up out of the stove itself, out of the stovepipe, and turns into a 24-gauge black pipe, and then it goes on up into the masonry flue. There's also double wall and triple wall insulated pipe. But again, the best way to do the right thing for your stove is to check with the local codes and laws and manufacturers' specifications. I'd like to talk about the situation when you first get your stove hooked up and it's all ready to go, that you would light a small fire first to help with the curing and the sealing, as well as the contraction and expansion of the metals, that they would be incremental. You would go with a small fire and then increase to a medium fire, and then to a normal fire would be the best way to break your stove in, so that it would give you long life in your stovetop as well as the rest of your stove. I'd like to talk to you about one of the most important aspects of a wood stove is the periodic maintenance that needs to be done with them. It is cleaning out your ash pan so that your stove can work efficiently. You take one of the tools that is provided with your wood cook stove and knock, when it's cool, Don't do this when it's hot. Best time is when it is cool. Just knock all the ash down through the grate. And once you're through knocking all of the ash down to the ash pan, put your poker away. And it's always a good idea to protect your floor with something to keep from getting any hot embers that would still be live onto your wood floor or any other type of floor that you have. And so we just use a plastic garbage bag cut open on one end so we can lay it down on the floor to protect it. You've got this toe plate that helps retain the ash when you pull the ash pan out. This is the left-hand side, and it's a little bit messy, but it cleans up very quickly once you're finished with it. And you would pull this out and take it to where you would have what I use is a galvanized bucket, and I take it outside and dump it in the galvanized bucket because as you dump it, ash will fly up from it and would make it dustier inside your house. And so I take it outside to do that, and then once we have put it into the galvanized bucket, if you have something you can cover it so that ashes don't get blown away or things like that, that would probably be a good idea. Now I've emptied the one ash pan. You just slide it back in. Just want to make sure there's nothing obstructing your gasket so that it can make an airtight seal. And it's in good shape. So we close the door back up and lock it in place. Do the same with the right-hand side. Now I want you to notice I'm doing this with a cold stove where there's no chance of any embers whatsoever. So if you were to do it where there's a possibility where there would be any live coals or embers, you would want to protect your floor with something that's non-flammable. As well as once you dump your embers into your bucket and you cover it, make sure that whatever you cover it with is also non-flammable. Again, just take this outside and dump it into whatever you choose to dump your ashes in. And that's all there is to it, cleaning the ash pans. Now, how often you have to do this type of maintenance will depend on a number of factors. Again, make sure that there's nothing obstructing your gasket on the door, as well as on the stove itself. Make sure there's no other ash in there to keep it from sealing, and it's all fine there. But how often you have to clean your ash pans has several variables. A few of them, which are what time of year it is that you're using your stove. People in the north, of course, they have more fires throughout the year, as well as people in the south. If you have an outside summer kitchen or a room off to the side of your house that you can use your stove year-round, of course, there will be more ash that you'd have to clean out more often. But so that's one of the variables. Another one is what type of wood you're using. A pine or softwood will give you more ash than a hardwood. And so you just have to keep an eye on it. You can see down through the grates, if you knock it down and you can see the ash piling up, you know it's getting close to the time that you need to clean out your ash pans. Another aspect of maintenance on your stove is periodically you want to check the clean out area to check on your creosote and if you have any ash built up on the top of your oven surface, not the stovetop surface, but the oven surface, which is right underneath here. And we can do that by taking this inspection door off the top of the stove. Very easily done with just a table knife or any other knife really that you have. You just come up to the edge of it, take it up off of there. And you can inspect it by looking in here with a flashlight or whatever. And you're always going to have a little bit of ash that once the fire comes up over the top of this oven, it will produce some ashes and things like that. Possibly some creosote depending on what type of wood you're burning, how green your wood is. And I would recommend that you would use the driest wood that you can that has been dried here in the south where we are. At least dry it for a year, split, and ready to go that way. Now out west further, in the northwest, I know that the trees and things are drier out there, so you don't have to have your drying time with your wood as long of a period of time. But what you would do with this scraper, this very simple piece of equipment, you would just come up and through here and very simply, easily done, push it right over into the firebox. And this over here, on the other side of the oven, you would just take it and go down the side of it, which would take it down underneath where the oven is. And once you do knock that down underneath where the oven is, there's another door that you would take off, very easily accessible. You would pull out this drawer. On this particular model, this particular stove, this is where the clean out is. And once you get done cleaning off the top of your oven and the side of the oven, there's a clean out door down here. You would take that off. You can take your drawer off if you need to. Put a pan underneath it and take your scraper and scrape all four corners and pull any ash or creosote that may be in there into your container. That's all there is to maintaining the ash pan as well as the cleanouts. Very easily done, very easily accessible. What I'm doing here is just showing you what can be done if you were to ever spill food or anything on the top of your wood cook stove. It's a very simple process of getting some steel wool or triple-aught steel wool and coming along, knocking off any of the dried, burnt-on things. Usually it's a good time to do it in the morning when your stove is cooler. Just come along and knock off anything that would be there of any, like I said, any dried-on food or anything like that, as well as if you got any boilovers, you can just clean up the nickel plating as well at the same time. And if for any reason you have to shut your stove down for an extended period of time, what we do, and you take a little bit of vegetable shortening and you coat the top of your stove. Very, very light coating. And then we would go and put a very inexpensive garbage bag, cut it, and put it on top of it so that it seals to where there's no corrosion or rust or anything like that that can get to your stovetop. And then a vinyl tablecloth. And once that garbage bag is on, it adheres to it and sticks to it to keep any rust or corrosion from happening underneath that. And once you get finished and you're ready to use the wood cook stove again, you would take that off and you will find a beautiful top underneath. We have found it helpful and convenient that while not being used, the wood cook stove is not being used, that this could be used as a countertop or a workstation while cooking, or for storing pots and pans and things such as that. Very simple process. Takes the whole, maybe 5 minutes to do it. And the whole reason for doing it is to protect your stovetop. And you can see how well it seals down to the stovetop. And then she puts the tablecloth on. Now to take your stove out of storage is very simple. If you have anything stored on it, you just take those off, take the tablecloth off. take the garbage bag off. And simply just take some paper towel. You could use cloth if you wanted to, but this is disposable. And you could also use this to help start your fire once you are finished wiping the top down. Make sure you get off as much of it as you can. But with it being a thin coating and being on there for that long, for a period of time, it will not take you long at all to wipe it all down, and you're ready to put a fire in.
How many years have y'all cooked on a wood stove?
Well, it's been over 8 years now since we moved to the Plain community.
Has it all been on this stove behind you?
No. The first stove we had wasn't as efficient as well, we had an older stove that was old like Grandma's old type stove that we had when we first came to the community.
This is a wood cook stove?
Yes, a wood cook stove. I believe it was a Home Comfort, something like that.
An old, not very well taken care of
No.
home comfort.
But that's all we could find before we came here. We knew we needed to have one when we got here because we didn't have anything else to cook on. We had one ordered, like Susan had said earlier, but it hadn't come yet. We got here in September. It didn't show up until December.
Right.
And so we went that long trying to figure out how to cook on this old, inefficient wood cook stove. But then we did receive a new one, came down in a horse trailer. That's how they bring some of the Amish stoves to, that's how they're delivered, in a horse trailer. But they get there safe and sound and just fine. We got that stove because a lot of the people said, yeah, this is the top, the best. And we figured, well, if that's it, we don't know anything about all this, so let's get the best one so we know we're learning on the best.
Right.
Well, it turns out that, in our opinion, it was not the best. And we started seeing other people in the Plain community getting away from the traditional stoves that they had been buying for years. And so that's when I started asking around. I said, what's these new stoves you're getting? And they said, well, they're called Flameview. I said, well, tell me about them a little bit. And so people started telling us this and that, and telling me, especially because I see them all the time because I work close to them. And they were just giving me all the good points about these stoves, and more people were getting rid of their older stoves and other models of stoves and getting these stoves. One of the things I remember this Amish man saying to me, he says, my wife can get up in the morning, he says, I fire the stove up, and he said, in 15 minutes my wife can cook me biscuits on it, or in it. And I said, 15 minutes? I said, the one we have now takes at least an hour to get prepared to bake something in it or even cook on the top. I said, that sounds like the stove that I want. And so we prayed, Lord, if you want us to have one of those stoves, we need to sell the one that we have because they're expensive. They're an investment in our home and our lives because they are the hub of your home. You can cook your food, you can bake your food, you can heat your water, you can dry vegetables, herbs, dry your clothes above them. Very efficient to basically be the hub of your home. That's where the Plain people, they build their houses around their stoves.
And there was other stoves too that we tried. We had a summer stove that was different from the stove we had inside. That enabled us to use a wood cook stove year round. It just was sat on the side porch, a screened-in porch, and that was a different brand of stove made by a different manufacturer than our inside stove. So, and then we had neighbors where you go to eat over their house, and I had the ability to cook on other ladies' stoves. We've cooked on 3, 4, 5 different Amish wood cook stoves, and so we've been very blessed that way. So we could, see what we liked and what worked the best, and it was the Flame View, I guess, if you want to tell them about how we got started.
And what really spoke to me was how many people, when they have their choice, that they've lived this way all their lives, when they have a choice of what stove they want to use, the Flameview stove is what they're using. And so that, again, spoke to me. You go to the people who have the knowledge, who have the experience. Those are the ones that you listen to.
The plain people,
Yes.
the Amish, the Mennonites.
Yes. The people who, that's how they live.
That's why.
Those are the ones you go to get the knowledge.
And Daniel liked these stoves so much, he said, I want to sell these stoves. There's people like us that need to know about these stoves. And in speaking those words, a prayer was answered because we had prayed that the Lord would give us a home business where Daniel could be home more.
Amen.
And be with the family and lead the family, especially with what's ahead. And when he spoke those words, a home business was suddenly birthed. And the Lord gave me the name one day, Stoves and More. I wasn't sure, Stoves and More. We weren't even sure we liked the name. But then we found out why it said and more.
Why?
The more became the ministry part. It wasn't just about selling the stove. It was about imparting the knowledge to God's people in these latter days to help them get out, to teach them what they need to know and to teach them quickly. So the more is the ministry.
To share what we have learned with God's people.
And the business has grown from one stove. Other Amish stove manufacturers actually approached us about selling their stoves. Now, while we tend to find the Flameview a favorite, not everybody is going to agree with us. We know that, and that's okay. So we are able to offer every Amish stove that is manufactured through our business. We developed relationships when we lived among the Plain people. We learned the protocol. And we earned their trust, and they are willing to work with us, even though we are not of them, and sell their stoves.
But all 4 of the manufacturers and all of the different models that they sell, we have available.
And the stoves are as individual as the people who buy them. So circumstances, situations, people's preferences will all dictate, budgets will all dictate what stove they might prefer or purchase. So we did want to have variety. We
Yes.
can offer you a stove for every budget, really.
Now, let's say a family moves out and they realize they want to prepare for the future. They want to live and have electricity 24/7 and live comfortable. But also they want to learn how to cook on a wood cook stove for that time when they won't have electricity. What if they get the stove and the housewife, the cook, is just baffled as to what to do? Can they call you folks, or is there somebody they can call, the manufacturer, or what? Who?
They could call us because we have the knowledge that we could share with people coming out of the city. The Amish Plain people, they don't have any idea what it's like not to live that way. And so in some ways they don't have a patience for possibly telling somebody. Now, when we moved to the Plain community, they worked with us some, but they left us on our own also to learn ourselves. And it was the Lord helping us by trial and error in many different things, learning how to live non-electrically, learn on just alternative energy, developing the spring, developing an alternative energy source, learning to cook in the wood cook stove, heat water.
But that's the ministry part of our business. We are very open and more than willing to take phone calls from people who have questions before they purchase, after they purchase. I have no trouble if a woman's got something on the stove and she's baffled as to what to do. If she wants to pick up the phone, I'll walk her through it, you know. That's part of what we want to be able to offer people. That's the ministry part of Stoves and More.
Yes.
Not just sell them a stove and leave them high and dry and say, you'll learn. We're willing to stay there with them and help them as best we can.
Do the manufacturers of all these stoves offer this service?
No.
Some of them you can't even phone because they're old order Amish. All you can do is contact them through the mail. But no, they don't offer that. And as Daniel mentioned, they don't necessarily, they wouldn't understand. They've never lived with electricity. They grew up using a wood cook stove and can't imagine a life not knowing, but we do. And so maybe that's why the Lord's used us, because we've been on both ends and we can sympathize and we can understand, and we're willing to walk you through it so you don't have to go through some of the trials and errors that we experienced.
Right.
Sometimes just being able to talk to somebody and ask questions relieves a lot of anxiety. Some things seem so overwhelming, but then you get somebody on the other end of the phone, they go, you know, that's really not such a big deal, and you'll do just fine, and it gives them the encouragement to keep going and to try it.
I'm going to ask you both this question, and I'm going to let whoever wants to go first, go first. And that question is this: what advice do you have for God's people making the move out of the cities into the mountains, the wilderness areas?
You want to answer that first?
Well, that's a loaded question. Do it. If you wait for the fear to go away, for all the dollars to go into place, for all the knowledge to be there, it'll never happen. You know, there's an old adage that says if you wait to have children until you can afford them, you'd never have them. Well, it's kind of, moving to the country is kind of the same way. You have to determine with God's grace to just do it. And just to really pray that God increases your faith and trust in Him, that He will walk you through whatever it takes to get out there. We just feel with all our heart to hesitate is not a good thing at this point in time.
We're getting close to the end of time.
Yeah.
And to not heed the counsel
Right,
is being disobedient.
right.
And we are the ones that have to answer for ourselves before the Lord, for our families and what we do.
We don't believe there's time, nor will you ever have all the answers, all the pieces, all in place so you can go, okay, I feel comfortable, let's do it. It really is an act of faith. It's like the call of Abraham, where you have to go in faith and just trust God to put the people in your path, to teach you, to put the money into place that it's going to take, to put the land into place, all the things that we that keep us up night going, how are we going to do this? How, you know, you just got to put your foot in the sea and let Him part it. And He will. He did it for us. We had a lot of unknowns when we moved, and He brought us through. And now, you know, He's raising up people, not just us, but there's a lot of other people. There's ministries that are out there to help to make the transition. You know, we're not expected to go and do it alone.
And it's not going to be easy.
Not always. There are
It
trials.
won't be easy.
Is it worth it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We
Even
know,
though it's not easy.
oh, yes. And we know many people that have made the transition, that have moved out, and they would not go
They
back.
won't go back. No pain, no gain.
That's right.
And like Daniel said earlier, it's our characters and prayerfully our families that will go to heaven with us. Not our wood cook stoves, not our bank accounts, and you can go on with the list. It's our characters and people.
I've heard
Go to heaven.
of a lot of people that have talked about interviewing successful people toward the end of their life. They always had regrets of not spending more time with their family, more time with God. They never said, I wish I would have worked more. I wish I'd had more money.
Right.
It was always the opposite. But they can't go back and change that.
The blessings outweigh the trials. They really do. When we can look back and say that. The blessings outweigh the trials. And I'm saying it to convince myself because I know we've got more trials ahead. It won't be the same the second time as it was the first time, but there will be different trials. And I need to, remind myself and to tell others the blessings do outweigh the trials.
But inspiration tells us that it's 10 times harder
Right.
to have a godly family in the city than in the country.
Right.
And I would say that it's more than 10 times harder now because of the wicked world we live in. We are bombarded on every side with the enemy and his snares. But if you remove yourself as much as possible from those things, how much more sweet is that to be closer to the Lord and to your family?
Right. Agree on the advice. Get out. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. And don't look back.